Hey there, tonight we're exploring what fishing was like in ancient China, where the art of casting nets wasn't just about sustenance, but an intricate dance mirroring the harmony of nature. A world where bamboo rods and silk lines were the tools of the trade, not the Hollywood version, you know. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. You're up with the sunrise, and guess what? You're about to dive headfirst into a day of fishing in ancient China, circa 200 BCE. It's more than a relaxing riverside hobby. It's a gritty, economically driven enterprise. Forget the serene watercolor images of solitary fishermen. You're gearing up for real work. First things first, you need your gear. You're in the Han Dynasty, where technological advancement is more than just a buzzword. It's a way of life that's pushing everything, including fishing, into new realms. Let's talk about your bamboo fishing rod. Not just any old stick, this rod is the result of an intricate process. Bamboo is chosen for its strength and flexibility, properties well suited to the task at hand. You're looking at a rod that's been carefully cut, dried, and treated, providing the perfect balance between strength and suppleness. This isn't just a tool, it's a testament to the ingenuity of the Han engineers. Now about those nets. You're not just tossing any old mesh into the river. The fishing nets of this era are woven from hemp or silk, each with its own price tag and prestige. A decent net might set you back about 100 coins, small change if you're an emperor, but a serious investment for the average fisher folk. Silk nets are the Ferraris of the fishing world, offering durability and effectiveness, but at a premium. This is your long-term investment, your lifeline to the river's bounty. Your boat, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a simple affair. Small, wooden, and ideally suited for navigating the winding waterways that crisscross the landscape. You're not voyaging across the seas. You're hugging the riverbanks, seeking out the best spots to cast your line or drop your net. Each boat is a carefully constructed piece of craftsmanship, designed for stability and maneuverability. And these boats aren't just floating platforms. They are the workhorses of the river economy, essential for transporting your catch back to shore. But before you get too carried away with romantic notions of floating peacefully down the river, let's ground this in reality. Fishing is a business, and it's all about the bottom line. The idyllic image of a lone fisherman silhouetted against the dawn might make for a great Instagram post, if only that existed. But back in your reality, there's a lot more at stake. You're up against not only the elements, but also the economic pressures of the trade. The Han Dynasty's bureaucratic machine is vast, and taxes are a constant burden on your profits. Every fish you catch is one more step toward paying off the tax collector, keeping your family fed, and if you're lucky, maybe even turning a profit. The river, while beautiful, is also unpredictable. Weather, water levels, and competition from other fishermen can all impact your haul. It's a constant balancing act, managing your resources, your time, and your place in the market. You're not just fishing for sport, you're fishing to survive. Each cast of the net is a gamble, each pull a potential windfall or a reminder of the harsh realities of the trade. So, as you set out on the water, remember, this day isn't just about tranquility and natural beauty. It's about survival, skill, and the drive to make a living. You're part of a tradition that's as old as the rivers themselves, but with the added twist of Han Dynasty innovation. This is fishing, ancient China style, gritty, demanding, and far from the easygoing idyll you might have imagined. Welcome to the real world of ancient fishing, where every sunrise is a new beginning, fraught with challenges and opportunities. Now that you're knee-deep in the river of ancient China's fishing world, it's time to meet your colleagues. Spoiler alert, it's not all brotherhood and camaraderie out here. The rivers might be public, but the hierarchies are more rigid than a bamboo rod left in the sun too long. Let's dive into the choppy waters of social dynamics among fishermen. First off, imagine a bustling scene. You're not the only one out here. Picture a flotilla of boats, each manned by folks who, like you, are hoping to reel in the catch of the day. But don't get too cozy. This isn't a merry band of merry men. Social class casts a long shadow over the river, my friend. Those at the top of the pecking order, Usually the ones who own the best boats and finest nets often dictate who gets to fish where and when. It's a classic case of the rich get richer, except instead of starks, we're talking about sturgeon. In this aquatic society, the head honchos hold the prime spots on the river. They're the ones with enough funds to invest in silk nets and maintain several boats. If you're lucky, they'll let you tag along, of course. That means sharing your catch and probably fetching their lunch while you're at it. This isn't just generosity. It's a business model that would make modern-day CEOs nod in approval. Now, if you're lower on the social ladder, things get trickier. You might be working with a simple hemp net, trying to make your daily quota while dodging the whims of nature and the dictates of the river's unofficial overseers. You're hustling, not just for fish, but for survival. It's a dog-fish-eat-dogfish world, and every cast of the net is a gamble. This isn't just a job. It's a high-stakes game of aquatic roulette. Let's not forget the political waters you're navigating. Fishing rights are as much a resource as the fish themselves. And just like today's intellectual property battles, these rights were a hot commodity. An imperial decree could change the game overnight. If the emperor decided that a certain area was off-limits for fishing, well, tough luck. Guess who's eating rice for the foreseeable future? Yep, that'd be you. The Han Dynasty was no stranger to bureaucratic red tape. The decrees could dictate everything from who was allowed to fish to what kind of fish you could catch. And talk about taxes. The government kept a keen eye on your catch, ready to swoop in with a demand for their cut. If you think tax audits are a modern-day nightmare, try dealing with an ancient tax collector with the power of the emperor behind him. These laws weren't just idle threats. They shaped the very fabric of fishing communities. A decree could mean the difference between a thriving community and a starving one. And you thought your HOA was strict. This is the gritty reality of fishing in ancient China, where politics and survival are as intertwined as a fisherman's knot. Beyond the politics, there's also the small matter of distribution. Once you haul in your catch, it's time to divvy up the spoils. But fair warning, this isn't a free-for-all. The top dogs get first dibs, and it trickles down from there. You're hoping for a few decent-sized fish by the end of it. Not exactly the makings of a seafood feast, but it's better than going home empty-handed. But why, you ask, would anyone put up with these conditions? Well, for one, there's the allure of the river itself. The freedom to navigate its waters, the promise of a big catch. It's a siren song that's hard to resist. Plus, there's always the hope of hitting it big, of pulling in a catch that'll let you climb a rung or two on the social ladder. After all, who doesn't dream of a little upward mobility? So here you are, navigating the complex waters of social hierarchies, political edicts, and the ever-present need to fill your nets. Fishing in ancient China isn't just a way to make a living, it's a way of life, complete with its own set of challenges and rewards. As the sun sets on another day of hard work, you're left with the satisfaction of knowing you've survived to fish another day. And in this world, that's no small feat. And as you bask in the satisfaction of having survived another day on these turbulent waters, let's cast our net a little deeper and talk about the catch itself, the real star of this aquatic drama. High noon is approaching, and with it the moment of truth. What are you actually pulling out of the river, and why do you care? First up, let's chat about the A-listers of the fish world. Carp, my friend, is the Tom Hanks of ancient Chinese rivers, beloved and ever-present. Carp wasn't just a fish, it was a cultural icon, symbolizing perseverance and determination. If you're reeling in carp, you're not just catching dinner, you're pulling in a piece of cultural heritage. These fish were prized not only for their taste, but also for their resilience and ability to adapt to various environments. Whether you're a humble fisherman or a noble at a banquet, carp is the dish that bridges social divides. But don't go thinking it's carp all the way down. The Yellow and Yangtze rivers were teeming with diversity. Sturgeon, for instance, was the caviar of the day, quite literally. If you've got a sturgeon in your net, you're practically holding a golden ticket. These hefty swimmers could be transformed into a delicacy that tickled the fancy of ancient gourmands and filled the coffers of those savvy enough to catch them. Then there's the catfish, a slippery fellow that has been dodging hooks since time immemorial. Consider it the Houdini of the rivers, able to thrive in murky waters where others might flounder. Now, if you're imagining these rivers as endless buffets teeming with piscine delights, I hate to burst your bubble like a poorly tied net. The reality was a tad less idyllic. Environmental factors played a huge role in what you could expect to catch. Seasonal shifts were the invisible hand guiding your fishing strategy. Spring might bring a bounty of fish as they moved upstream to spawn, but come winter, and you're more likely to be staring at ice and wondering why you didn't pursue a career in, I dunno, partery. And it's not just about seasons. Water levels, affected by everything from rainfall to upstream damming efforts, could turn a rich fishing spot into a barren patch of disappointment. A dry season might lower water levels to the point where boats scrape the riverbed, while a rainy season could create a deluge that scatters fish far and wide. Talk about a high-stakes game of hide and seek. Let's not forget the human factor in this ecological equation. Overfishing wasn't just a modern problem. The ancient Chinese were already seeing the effects of their fishing enthusiasm. With everyone and their grandmother trying to reel in the big one, certain species began to decline. The romantic vision of rivers brimming with fish was, in many cases, a myth sustained by nostalgic memories and the occasional lucky haul. In reality, competition was fierce, and the river's bounty wasn't the bottomless treasure trove you might imagine. Fishing methods, too, were a blend of ingenuity and desperation. From the elegant cast of a line to the brute efficiency of drag nets, fishermen employed a variety of techniques to maximize their haul. A skilled fisherman knew the best time to cast his net, the right bait to use, and the perfect spot to moor his boat. But even the most seasoned pro couldn't outwit the changing tides of nature and the ever-watchful eye of the bureaucratic machine. And speaking of bureaucracy, let's not overlook the impact of imperial edicts. The Han Dynasty didn't just leave you to fend for yourself. They knew the value of a well-managed resource. Fishing quotas and restrictions were imposed to prevent overexploitation, but enforcement was, shall we say, a bit hit or miss. An edict might proclaim a ban on catching certain species, but when the tax collector's breathing down your neck, principles sometimes take a backseat to practicality. So, as you haul in your net under the blistering sun, remember that each fish is a story, a tale of survival, adaptation, and yes, a little bit of luck. You're not just a fisherman, you're a player in a complex dance, a participant in a millennia-old tradition of man versus nature. Some days, you win the jackpot with a net full of carp. Other days, you're left nursing a sunburn and a bruised ego. Welcome to the real world of ancient Chinese fishing, where the only certainty is uncertainty. Stay tuned, because there's more to this story. A deeper dive into the lives of those who call the riverbanks home, and the intricate web of commerce and culture that spins around each catch. The river may be ancient, but the stories it holds are timeless, and we're just getting started. As you sit by the riverbank, pondering the fate of your catch, it's time to pivot from the thrill of the chase to the cold, hard business of trade. Because let's face it, in ancient China, fish weren't just swimming protein bars. They were a cornerstone of the local economy. Now that you've snagged your haul, it's time to navigate the winding roads of market trade networks, where barter and coins danced in a delicate waltz, and merchants made profits that would make modern hedge fund managers salivate. First things first, the roads, or should I say rivers, were the lifelines of trade. The waterways of ancient China were like the highways of the Han Dynasty, bustling with boats carrying everything from silk to spices, and of course, fish. The Yellow and Yangtze rivers weren't just teeming with life beneath the surface, they were bustling above it, too. These rivers connected the coast to the inland markets, weaving a web of commerce that stretched across the empire. Picture it, boats laden with fish making their way to bustling hubs like Chang'an, the heart of trade, where goods from all corners of the empire converged. But how did this trade actually work? Was it all handshakes and trust? Spoiler alert, not even close. Let's talk currency, a concept that was as slippery as a wet fish. In the Han Dynasty, coins were the currency of choice, small, circular, with a square hole in the middle. These coins, usually made of bronze, were the lifeblood of the economy. However, barter was still alive and kicking, especially in rural areas where coins were as rare as a good hair day on a fishing boat. Fish could be swapped for grain, tools, or even labor. It was an intricate dance of supply and demand, with a side of haggling that would put today's flea markets to shame. Speaking of markets, let's dive into the local scene. Picture a bustling market square, filled with the shouts of vendors hawking their wares. Fishmongers, with their stalls piled high, shouting prices to entice buyers. But don't be fooled by the apparent prosperity. This was no egalitarian utopia. The merchants, those slick operators who bought your fish for a handful of coins and sold them for a small fortune, were the real winners in this game. They had the connections, the bargaining power, and the audacity to turn your hard-won catch into a gold mine. Meanwhile, fishermen like you were left holding the short end of the bamboo stick. The disparity between fishermen and merchants was as clear as a freshly polished coin. You, the humble fisherfolk, bore the brunt of the labor, battling the elements for a decent catch. But the merchants, those marketplace maestros, knew how to play the game. They understood the value of fish not just as food, but as a commodity that could be traded for luxury goods, spices, and fine fabrics. They were the middlemen who turned the fruits of your labor into their own prosperity. It's a tale as old as time. The ones who toil versus the ones who trade, the laborers versus the leeches. Now let's bust a myth that's as persistent as a mosquito on a summer night. The idea that everyone in the trade was on equal footing. The romantic notion of a fair and balanced market is just that, a fantasy. The reality was much grittier. The merchants held the power, the connections to the urban elite, and the ability to manipulate prices to their advantage. Meanwhile, fishermen often found themselves in a precarious position, at the mercy of fluctuating market demands and the whims of nature. Equality in ancient Chinese trade was about as real as a three-headed calf. But why did fish hold such allure in the first place? Beyond the obvious culinary delights, fish were a symbol of prosperity and abundance. They featured prominently in festivals and religious offerings, adding a splash of spirituality to their economic importance. It wasn't just about feeding the family. It was about sustaining a culture, a way of life that was as much about tradition as it was about taste. Now, before you hang up your fishing rod in despair, remember that there was always a glimmer of hope. The river was unpredictable, yes, but it was also a source of endless possibility. A lucky catch, a particularly bountiful season, and you might just find yourself in a position to barter for better nets, perhaps even a larger boat. The river might be a harsh mistress, but she was also a generous one, offering the chance for fortune to those brave enough to cast their nets into her depths. And so, as the afternoon sun begins to dip, casting long shadows over the water, you reflect on the complex tapestry of trade networks that span this vast land. The riverbanks may seem quiet now, but beneath the surface, commerce hums with life, fueled by the efforts of countless fisherfolk and merchants. The economy of ancient China was a living, breathing entity, shaped by the ebb and flow of the rivers, the rise and fall of dynasties, and the tireless work of those who dared to seek their fortunes on the water. So there you have it, a snapshot of the economic engine that powered ancient Chinese society, where fish were more than just dinner. They were the currency of a world defined by trade and tradition. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the river and the people who depended on it, because the story doesn't end here. There's more to explore, more to discover, and as always, more fish to catch. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the day's toil on the river slowly gives way to the evening rituals that punctuate life in ancient China. Your boat is safely moored, your catch of the day is sorted, and now comes the task of preparing your treasures from the river for the days ahead. But this isn't just about gutting fish and calling it a night. Oh no, there's a whole ritual to this, steeped in practicality and culture. First order of business is preservation. In an era where refrigeration is a pipe dream and the nearest icebox is a couple of 1,000 years away, you've got to get creative. Enter salting and drying, the ancient world's answer to the perishable problem. You're sprinkling salt like you're trying to ward off evil spirits, not too far-fetched, considering salt's value at the time. This mineral is worth its weight in, well, itself, often used as currency and traded alongside the very fish it preserves. Once salted, the fish are laid out to dry, turning your modest abode into a scene that would make any modern food safety inspector twitch. But hey, this is how it's done. Fish strung up like laundry, the air heavy with the tangy scent of salt and sea. While the process might lack the glamour of a Michelin star kitchen, it's effective, and let's be honest, the original form of meal prep. But why go through all this trouble? The answer lies in the storied place fish hold in Chinese culture. Beyond being a staple of the diet, fish symbolize abundance and prosperity, a nod to their ability to multiply and thrive in challenging environments. In fact, the Chinese word for fish, yu, is phonetically similar to the word for surplus, making fish a popular symbol during New Year celebrations when everyone's wishing for a little extra luck. and plenty in the pantry. Fish appear in art, literature, and even in the dreams of the ambitious. The tale of the carp swimming upstream to become a dragon is a favorite allegory for perseverance and transformation. It's the ancient version of the underdog story, the plucky carp defying the odds, and it resonates with anyone who's ever dared to dream big. In a society that values hard work and determination, this story swims alongside reality, inspiring fishermen and scholars alike. Now, let's turn our attention to the culinary canvas. Fish in ancient China isn't just food, it's an art form. From steaming to frying, the preparation methods are as diverse as the fish themselves. Steamed fish, delicately seasoned with ginger and scallions, is a classic. It's a dish that lets the natural flavors shine, perfect for a society that, much like today, values balance and harmony. On the flip side, there's the more robustly flavored fish dishes, often featuring bold spices and sauces, a testament to the rich tapestry of regional cuisines. These methods not only highlight the fish's natural flavors, but also its cultural significance. Fish isn't just a meal, it's a celebration of nature's bounty, a symbol of life's ebb and flow. It's the centerpiece at banquets and family gatherings, a dish that ties people to the land and the water that sustains them. As you wrap up the day, cleaning the last of the fish and preparing for another round tomorrow, you can't help but reflect on the enduring legacy of these ancient practices. The techniques and traditions honed over centuries have laid the foundation for modern fishing and cuisine. Today's sustainable fishing practices, market strategies, and culinary innovations all have roots winding their way back to the riverbanks of ancient China. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of those who came before, navigating both literal and metaphorical waters with a deftness that would impress any modern-day entrepreneur. But let's not romanticize it too much. The life of an ancient fisherman was, to put it mildly, tough. Taxes loomed large, weather was unpredictable, and the market was a fickle beast. The river, while a source of life, could also be a source of danger. Yet despite these challenges, they persevered. Their stories, woven into the fabric of history, remind us of the tenacity of the human spirit, the drive to not only survive, but thrive in the face of adversity. In a world that's constantly in flux, the lessons from these ancient fishermen remain strikingly relevant. Adaptation, innovation, and a sense of community were as vital then as they are now. The same ingenuity that turned bamboo into fishing rods fuels today's technological advancements. The cooperative spirit that saw fishermen sharing knowledge and resources echoes in modern-day collaborations. So as you sit by the dim glow of the fire, savoring the fruits of your labor, take a moment to appreciate the legacy you're a part of. You're not just a fisher folk. You're a steward of a tradition that stretches back millennia, a guardian of stories told by the river's gentle whisper. The challenges faced by ancient fishermen were many, but their legacy is one of endurance and ingenuity, a tribute to the enduring bond between humanity and the natural world. And with that, we draw our nets in, leaving the river to its nocturnal symphony. The stars above reflect in the water below, a reminder that while much has changed, much remains the same. The river continues to flow, as do the stories it carries, weaving through time and space, connecting us all to the rich tapestry of history. Welcome to the legacy of ancient Chinese fishing, a journey through time, one cast of the net at a time. Your eyes flutter open to the sounds of life bustling around you. You're in an 8th century caravanserai in Samarkand, a city that's not just a dot on the map, but a full-blown behemoth in the heart of the Silk Road network. You might think you're waking up in some kind of exotic urban, but this place is more like the medieval version of a highway rest stop, complete with the cacophony of traders haggling over the day's deals, animals making themselves heard, and the odd chef stirring a pot of something that smells suspiciously like yesterday's dinner. The Silk Road, my friend, isn't just a single road. It's a tangled web of trade routes stretching up to 7,000 miles across Asia, connecting the bustling heart of China with the Mediterranean Sea. And Samarkand, well, it's like the grand central station of this whole operation, a city where the trade winds of the east and west collide in a storm of commerce and culture. You're part of a caravan that's basically a medieval freight train, with camels as your trusty, albeit slightly stubborn, locomotives. Each camel can haul around 400 pounds of goods, which is about the weight of a decent-sized vending machine. Imagine that on a camel's back, minus the chocolate bars. As you stretch and shake off the morning stiffness, you're greeted by the caravan master. This isn't just any guy with a clipboard and a whistle. He's the captain of this desert ship, part logistics genius, part survivalist, and all business. His job is to make sure this caravan runs smoother than a silk merchant's silver tongue. He's the one who knows which routes are open, which are bandit-infested nightmares, and how much it's going to cost to bribe your way through either. Speaking of silk, it's the superstar of this ancient trade network. The Chinese kept the secret of silk production as tightly under wraps as a Netflix password, making it the ultimate luxury item. But it's not just silk that's on the move. There are spices, as exotic as the rumors of the lands they come from, and precious stones that could fund a small kingdom. To the empires of the time, these goods are more than just shiny objects. They're lifelines. Trade on the Silk Road fuels economies, shifts political alliances, and transforms cultures. It's basically the ancient world's stock market, where a crash could mean a lot more than just a bad day for your portfolio. You might be wondering how these staggering distances were managed in a time before GPS or even reliable maps. Well, it wasn't easy. Caravans like yours traveled in stages, stopping at caravanserais every 20 to 30 miles. These fortified inns offered a safe place to rest, resupply, and importantly, swap stories and information about the road ahead. It's like Yelp, but with fewer stars and more survival tips. The journey is long and arduous, and the risks are as vast as the deserts you'll cross. But there's also a thrill to it, a sense of adventure that comes with knowing you're part of something bigger than yourself. Sure, it's romantic to think of the Silk Road as a place of adventure and discovery, but it's also a grind. It's dusty roads, predictable weather, and the constant threat of bandits lurking in the shadows. But without this relentless march of camels and traders, the world would be a smaller, poorer place. As you prepare for the day's journey, take a moment to soak it all in. The sights, the sounds, the smells. Yeah, especially the smells. This is the Silk Road in all its gritty glory. It's a world of high stakes and higher rewards, where fortunes are made and lost, sometimes in the blink of an eye. And you, my friend, are right in the thick of it. Welcome to the ride of your life. As you step into the bustling caravanserai courtyard, a living tapestry of humanity unfolds before you. It's easy to romanticize this as a harmonious melting pot, but let's not get carried away with that fairy tale just yet. This is more like a massive, chaotic marketplace where cultures collide, sometimes literally. Every face tells a story, and every story is as rich and tangled as the Silk Road itself. Let's start with the traders. These are your modern-day entrepreneurs, hustling with the intensity of a Black Friday sale. You've got Chinese merchants with bolts of silk, Persian traders with their intricate carpets, and Indian dealers pushing spices that could spice up even the blandest of medieval stews. And those are just the headliners. There are also the unsung heroes of the caravan, the translators. These linguistic gymnasts are flipping between Persian, Arabic, Chinese, and maybe even a little Greek. They're the Rosetta Stones of the Silk Road, ensuring that deals go down smoothly and misunderstandings don't turn into brawls. Imagine trying to barter over a sack of saffron without knowing if the other guy is asking for a fair price or your firstborn. Currency, now there's a hot mess. Forget about the universal swipe of a credit card. Here, you're juggling a circus of coins. You've got Chinese cash coins, Byzantine solidi, and Indian dinars, all clinking together in a pouch like some kind of ancient slot machine. It's a veritable Tower of Babel in coin form, with each trader hoping their currency will hold value long enough to make it to the next market. This isn't just capitalism at its finest. It's survival of the fittest, one coin flip at a time. But hold on, before you start dreaming that this was one big happy family road trip. Let's talk about the not-so-pretty side of the Silk Road. Banditry wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a full-blown occupational hazard. Picture this. You're surrounded by desert as far as the eye can see, and suddenly, a group of bandits materializes like a mirage, but with way more knives. These aren't the charming rogues of folklore. They're more like the tax collectors from hell, except they take everything, not just 10%. To combat these bandit boogermen, caravans developed a surprisingly modern solution: rudimentary insurance schemes. Merchants would pool resources into a communal part, a kind of proto-insurance fund. If bandits struck, the fund would cover part of the losses, assuming everyone didn't just lose their shirts. It's an early lesson in risk management, and one that's still as relevant today as ever. A bit of peace of mind in a world where peace was often in short supply. Cultural tensions, too, were as thick as the caravan dust. Different belief systems, languages, and customs were constantly rubbing shoulders, sometimes uneasily. Think of it as a medieval version of social media. Everyone's got an opinion, and they're not afraid to air it. But unlike social media, there's no unfollow button here, just a lot of awkward silences, and the occasional flare-up when tempers run high. Despite these tensions, there was a certain beauty in this chaotic exchange. The Silk Road was a crucible of innovation, where ideas, technologies, and even diseases were exchanged as readily as goods. Take paper, for example. Chinese papermaking techniques traveled along these routes, transforming the way information was recorded and shared. It's not just trade in spices and silk. It's trade in ideas and knowledge, a brainy bonus that shaped civilizations long after the goods had been sold. And yet, for all its dangers and discomforts, you can't help but feel a sense of camaraderie among the caravan members. When you're sharing a road as unforgiving as this, you learn to rely on each other. It's an unexpected bond, forged in the fires of necessity, where every shared meal and campfire story becomes a thread in the fabric of the Silk Road's grand tapestry. So, as you prepare to leave Samarkand, ready to face whatever the road throws your way, remember this. The Silk Road might be romanticized as a highway of adventure and discovery, but it's also a mirror reflecting the complexities of human nature. It's a stage where the best and worst of humanity play out, often at the same time. And you, dear traveler, are part of this grand, messy, and utterly fascinating show. The curtain's up, and the road is calling. As the dust settles behind your caravan, you understand that the Silk Road isn't just about haggling over spices or keeping bandits at bay. Oh no, the real drama lies in the political machinations that dance around this trade route like an over-caffeinated chess game. The Silk Road is a lifeblood for empires, but it's also a battlefield of power plays and territorial disputes, where every camel's trot is shadowed by the heavy boot of political ambition. Let's start with the Tang Dynasty, the powerhouse of China during the 8th century. Think of them as the corporate conglomerate of the East, with their hands in every part, especially when it comes to silk. The Tang were savvy rulers who understood that controlling the Silk Road meant controlling trade, and by extension, the economy. The dynasty invested heavily in infrastructure, building a network of roads and military outposts that would make even the most ambitious highway planners green with envy. But don't get too starry-eyed. This was less about civic duty and more about securing a steady flow of tax revenue. The Tang taxed traders based on the weight and value of their goods, making sure their coffers were as full as the caravans they protected. Now, let's jump across the continent to the Abbasid Caliphate, the Western counterpart in this grand game of geopolitical monopoly. The Abbasids, ruling from the vibrant city of Baghdad, equally keen on their slice of the Silk Road pie. They provided a vast network of protection, and much like the Tang, ensured their kingdom's prosperity through strategic taxation. These guys were the original pay-to-play operators, and they knew that a well-funded military presence could keep the trade routes open and the gold flowing. But here's the kicker. Both empires, in their quest for economic supremacy, inadvertently sowed the seeds of instability. The An-Lushan Rebellion, a mid-8th century uprising against the Tang dynasty, throws a real wrench into the works. This was no minor skirmish. It was a full-blown civil war that lasted nearly a decade, disrupting trade like a medieval version of a stock market crash. Imagine the chaos. The price of silk skyrockets, caravan routes become treacherous, and merchants face ruin or worse. The rebellion was so severe it reportedly halved the population of China, a staggering statistic that underscores the fragility of even the mightiest empires. Meanwhile, in the Abbasid realm, internal strife and external threats from the Byzantine Empire and nomadic tribes created a political landscape as stable as a house of cards in a wind tunnel. The caliphate's control over the Silk Road waxed and waned with the tides of fortune, proving that even the grandest cities can be vulnerable to the shifting sands of power. The empire's ambitions often clashed with the realities of geography and human nature. Transporting goods over thousands of miles was a logistical nightmare, akin to juggling flaming swords while riding a unicycle. Yet, the allure of profit was too great to resist. Traders navigated not just physical barriers, but a complex web of political alliances and enmities. This was a world where your success depended as much on your diplomatic acumen as on the quality of your goods. A misstep could mean tariffs that would make modern customs fees look like pocket change. Through all this, the Silk Road remained a place of paradoxes. It was a corridor of cultural exchange, yet also a conduit for imperial agendas. It connected worlds, but it could just as easily tear them apart. The road was a testament to human ingenuity and folly, a place where the dreams of empires were built and sometimes dashed. But let's not forget the traders caught in this crossfire. For them, the Silk Road was less about the grand sweep of history and more about survival. Every tax, every rebellion, every shift in power could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty. They were the unsung heroes, and occasionally the victims of this grand historical drama. So, as you trudge along this ancient highway, remember that every step is steeped in the ambitions and failures of those who came before. The Silk Road is more than just a trade route. It's a living tapestry of human endeavor, stitched together with the threads of ambition, greed, and resilience. Hold onto your hat, because the journey is far from over. The road ahead is long, and the lessons it holds are as vast as the landscapes you'll traverse. Just when you thought you had a handle on the complexities of the Silk Road's political drama, the real test begins, navigating the environmental gauntlet that Mother Nature so thoughtfully laid out. Strap in, because this isn't your leisurely jaunt through scenic countryside. It's more like a medieval Survivor episode, minus the TV crew and immunity idols. First up, the Taklamakan Desert, affectionately known as the Sea of Death. This place doesn't just want to kill you, it's got a master's degree in it. Stretching over 130,000 square miles, this sandy expanse is a graveyard of lost caravans and broken dreams. The Taklamakan boasts a temperature range that swings more wildly than a jazz band, from blistering highs of over 120 degrees F, 49 degrees C, during the day to chilling lows at night. Hydration isn't just important here, it's the difference between life and becoming a cautionary tale. Contrary to popular belief, crossing this desert wasn't a romantic ride under the stars. Dehydration was a constant, nagging companion, less like a gentle reminder and more like an aggressive debt collector. Camels, the ships of this desert sea, could drink up to 40 gallons in one go, but they were no substitute for a reliable water source. And to local guides, the unsung heroes of the Silk Road, these desert navigators were the Google Maps of their time, armed with an intimate knowledge of hidden wells and oases. Their expertise wasn't just a bonus, it was non-negotiable, the difference between hitting your destination or becoming a permanent part of the landscape. Then there were the sandstorms, or black winds, as they were ominously called. These weren't your garden variety breezes, more like nature's way of hitting the reset button on your sense of direction. Sandstorms could erupt without warning, turning visibility to zero and your carefully plotted course into a cosmic joke. Traders would hunker down in yurts, portable circular tents that were the medieval equivalent of a pop-up survival kit. These ingenious structures, insulated with felt and supported by wooden frames, offered a brief respite from the storm's fury and a place to regroup. But the desert was just a warm-up act. Next on the itinerary, the Pamir Mountains, known as the roof of the world, reaching heights of over 24,000 feet in some areas. These peaks were a formidable barrier, as inviting as a wall of razor wire. Altitude sickness was the Everest of challenges here, with traders gasping for breath in air thinner than a supermodel's patience. The risks were enormous, but so were the rewards. Making it across meant tapping into lucrative markets beyond the mountains. Here, too, the ingenuity of traders shone through. To combat the effects of altitude, they adopted a slow and steady approach, ascending gradually to acclimatize. Local knowledge was again paramount. Guides familiar with the mountain paths could navigate treacherous terrain and anticipate weather changes faster than you can say frostbite. And when it came to transporting goods, pack animals like yaks were the MVPs, their sturdy frames and sure-footedness making them indispensable for hauling silk and spices across these dizzying heights. So, was there any romance in these grueling journeys? Sure, if your idea of romance involves dodging death at every turn while nursing blisters and frostbite. The myth of the Silk Road as a leisurely stroll through exotic lands is just that, a myth. The reality was much grittier, a relentless test of endurance and survival skills. Yet the allure of the unknown, the promise of wealth, and the sheer human determination to overcome adversity added a layer of adventure that even today's thrill-seekers might envy. The Silk Road was a testament to human resilience, where every step forward was a victory against the odds. It was a place where the practicalities of trade met the harsh realities of nature, and where every trader's tale was a mix of triumph and tribulation. Sure, it wasn't all camel caravans and colorful bazaars. That's what makes it all the more fascinating. As you continue your journey along this ancient highway, remember that every grain of sand and every mountain pass carries the stories of those who dared to dream big in the face of daunting challenges. The Silk Road wasn't just a path across continents. It was a crucible where the metal of traders was tested and their legacy forged. And with every step, you're walking in the footsteps of those who shaped history with their grit, determination, and a dash of audacity. But if you thought the Silk Road was just about dodging sandstorms and altitude sickness, hold onto your turban, because here's where the real magic happens. This ancient trade route wasn't just a conveyor belt for silk and spices. It was the original internet, a bustling hub for exchanging more than just goods. Ideas, beliefs, and technologies flowed along these dusty paths, transforming cultures and shaping the world in ways that would make even Silicon Valley blush. Let's start with the spread of Buddhism. Picture this: monks in saffron robes trekking across deserts and mountains, carrying not just their teachings, but also sacred texts. Buddhism, originating in India, hitched a ride on the backs of camels and yaks, making its way to China, Central Asia, and beyond. You can thank the Silk Road for the giant Buddha statues found in places like Bamiyan, Afghanistan, remnants of a time when ideas traveled as freely as the wind. By the 7th century, Buddhism had woven itself into the very fabric of Chinese culture, leaving a legacy as enduring as the Great Wall itself. But the Silk Road didn't just export spirituality, it imported innovation. Take paper, for instance. Invented in China around 105 AD, it was a game-changer, the ancient world's version of a tech startup gone viral. By the 8th century, paper-making had reached Samarkand, where local craftsmen refined the technique, making it cheaper and easier to produce. From there, it spread to the Islamic world and eventually to Europe, revolutionizing communication. Imagine a world without paper. No books, no love letters, no passive-aggressive office memos. It's enough to make you appreciate the next sticky note you scribble on. Then there's the culinary exchange. The Silk Road was the OG food delivery service, introducing new flavors and ingredients to every kitchen it touched. Spices like cinnamon and cardamom from India made their way into Persian stews, while Chinese noodles took a detour to become Italian pasta. It was a gastronomic love affair that left taste buds tingling across continents. Without the Silk Road, your favorite curry or spaghetti might still be a distant dream. And let's not forget the arts. Techniques like glassblowing, which the Romans excelled at, traveled eastward, while Chinese porcelain made its way west. The cross-pollination of artistic styles led to innovations in everything from pottery to textiles, the vibrant colors of Persian rugs, and the intricate designs of Chinese silks, each piece a testament to cultures colliding and creating something entirely new. Now, we've all heard the romantic tales of Marco Polo and his journey along the Silk Road. Sure, he was one of the most famous travelers, but he wasn't blazing a trail, he was following one. The real heroes were the countless nameless traders, artisans, and scholars who trudged these routes, leaving their mark on history. They didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, altering the course of civilizations with every dusty step. But let's pump the brakes on the romanticism for a hot second. The Silk Road wasn't all enlightenment and enlightenment. It was also a vector for disease. The Black Death, anyone. Yep, it's widely believed that the bubonic plague hitched a ride along these same routes, traveling from Asia to Europe in the 14th century, wiping out an estimated 75 to 200 million people. Not exactly the kind of cultural exchange you put on a postcard, is it? For all its beauty and brutality, the Silk Road was a testament to human ambition and adaptability. It was a place where the boundaries of geography and culture blurred, creating a tapestry of shared knowledge and experience. The legacy of the Silk Road isn't just in the goods that were traded, but in the ideas that transformed societies. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of the Silk Road are still with us. The modern concept of globalization, the internet, even the idea of a multicultural society, all have roots in the exchanges that took place along this ancient highway. The Silk Road taught us that despite the borders and barriers, we're all interconnected. Every culture has something to offer, and every exchange enriches the human story. So as you wrap up your day on this legendary route, take a moment to reflect on the countless lives that walked these paths before you. The Silk Road is a reminder that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't the ones you can hold in your hand, but the ones that open your mind. As you pack up and head back to the present, remember this. History isn't just a series of events. It's a living, breathing narrative that shapes who we are today. And you, dear traveler, have been a part of that story. The road may end, but the journey never does. In a land where elephants were practically the SUVs of transportation and palaces were as common as Starbucks today, the year 1542 welcomed a future game-changer into the world, Akbar the Great. Now, you might think that being born into the Mughal dynasty meant a life of luxury and endless banquets, but Akbar's early years were more Game of Thrones than lifestyles of the rich and famous. Born on October 15th in the fortress of Umayyad, amidst the arid sands of present-day Pakistan, Akbar's entry into the world was anything but ordinary. His father, Humayun, was on the run, having just lost his empire to the Afghan leader Sher Shah Suri. So, while most newborns were swaddled in silk, Akbar was quite literally born on the run in exile. Talk about starting life in the fast lane. Growing up, Akbar didn't have the privilege of a Netflix subscription or a personal tutor to teach him the ABCs of ruling an empire. Instead, his education was a patchwork quilt of lessons from a diverse group of tutors who were as varied as the spices in a Mughal curry. One day it could be a Persian poet reciting couplets, and the next, a grizzled warrior teaching him the fine art of wielding a sword. And let's not forget the elephant trainers, because what's a Mughal prince without his trusty trunked steed? Akbar's education might have skipped over the finer points of reading and writing. Rumor has it he was dyslexic, but what he lacked in literacy, he made up for in street smarts and charisma. These were the real-world skills that would later make him a legendary ruler. Picture a kid who could charm the socks off a snake charmer while simultaneously strategizing his next chess move. Because yes, chess was a favorite pastime. At the tender age of 13, when most of us were just figuring out how to deal with acne and algebra, Akbar found himself on the Mughal throne. His father, Humayun, had managed to reclaim the empire briefly, but then took an unfortunate tumble down a flight of stairs in 1556, and well, let's just say gravity won that round. Akbar was suddenly thrust into power, and the kingdom was handed to him like a hot potato. Talk about a steep learning curve, with the empire's regency initially managed by his mentor and protector, Behram Khan. Young Akbar had to navigate a political landscape as turbulent as the monsoon seas. The throne room was a cauldron of intrigue and ambition, with every nobleman eyeing the crown like a piece of particularly juicy mutton. But Akbar, despite his age, had a knack for turning adversaries into allies. He was like the original social networker, building alliances across religious and cultural lines, a strategy that would later define his rule. Akbar's ascension wasn't just a matter of personal destiny. It was a political necessity. The empire needed a strong leader to fend off threats from all sides, from the Rajput kings in the west to the Afghan chieftains in the north. Yet Akbar wasn't just about survival. He was about thriving. He understood that to build an empire, you needed more than just soldiers and swords. You needed ideas, innovations, and quite frankly, a whole bunch of elephants for dramatic effect. The young emperor was also known for his love of the arts, which was just as well because life in the Mughal court was a mix of Bollywood drama and Shakespearean tragedy. Akbar's court was a magnet for artists, poets, and musicians, creating a cultural renaissance that would have made the Medici green with envy. And while he might not have penned any sonnets himself, Akbar appreciated the power of words and narratives, knowing they could be as potent as any weapon. As he grew into his role, Akbar's court became a melting pot of ideas and cultures, a place where Hindu philosophers could debate Islamic scholars, and Persian poets could rub shoulders with Rajput warriors. His reign was like the ultimate dinner party, where everyone was invited to the table, and the menu was as diverse as the guest list. In the grand tapestry of history, Akbar's early years were but a prelude to a reign that would redefine the Indian subcontinent. His childhood was a blend of chaos, charm, and challenges, but it was precisely this mix that shaped him into the ruler he would become. Akbar wasn't just a king who sat on a throne. He was a leader who understood the pulse of his people, a visionary who saw beyond the borders of his empire, and a kid who, against all odds, turned the game in his favor. From the get-go, Akbar was not content with just sitting on a throne that had more drama than a soap opera marathon. His vision extended beyond merely keeping his crown on his head. He had a knack for seeing the empire as a living organism, needing a strong backbone to function properly. And what better way to provide that backbone than through some good, old-fashioned administrative reform? Enter the Mansabdari system, a bureaucratic brainchild that was as revolutionary as it was ambitious. Picture this: a system designed to classify every nobleman and military officer according to their rank and pay. The term Mansab literally translates to rank, and in Akbar's empire, it was the key to climbing the social ladder. It was like LinkedIn for the elite, but instead of endorsements, you got elephants and jaguars. Those are land grants for the uninitiated. The Mansabdari system was Akbar's way of making sure his empire didn't just hold together with spit and promises. The Mughal administration became a complex web of responsibilities and privileges, where each Mansabdar was expected to maintain a certain number of troops to support the Mughal army. This wasn't just a neat little hierarchy. It was a well-oiled machine designed to keep the empire's military muscle flexed and ready for action. Forget Facebook. This was the original social network that actually got things done. But let's not pretend Akbar's reforms were all about military might. The man had a soft spot for economic strategies that went beyond hoarding gold like some medieval Scrooge McDuck. His taxation policies, for instance, were a stroke of genius or madness, depending on who you asked. The emperor introduced a standardized tax system based on crop yields, a move that was more innovative than you'd expect for the 16th century. Akbar's officials actually went out to measure the land and assess crop productivity. No drones or satellites here. Folks, just good old-fashioned eyeballing and maybe a bit of guesswork. You might think this sounds like a recipe for chaos, and you'd be partially right. Introducing a tax system in an era where communication was slower than dial-up internet was no walk in the park. But Akbar's reforms had a surprisingly stabilizing effect on the economy. By aligning taxes with actual agricultural output, he managed to create a more predictable revenue stream, allowing for better planning and distribution of resources. It was like budgeting with a Ouija board and somehow making it work. Now, let's talk about the elephant, or rather, the elephants in the room. Managing an empire as sprawling as the Mughal domain with 16th century tech was akin to running a multinational corporation using smoke signals. The absurdity of it all is not lost on us modern folks. Yet, Akbar was like the Steve Jobs of his time, minus the turtleneck, constantly innovating and adapting to the challenges of expansion and stability. One of Akbar's biggest challenges was balancing the desires of an ever-expanding empire with the need for internal stability. Expansion was the name of the game, but it wasn't just about grabbing land and calling it a day. Each new territory brought with it a mosaic of cultures, languages, and customs, all of which needed to be navigated with care. Akbar was a master of diplomacy, often preferring to marry alliances rather than wage wars. His matrimonial alliances with Rajput princesses weren't just romantic footnotes. They were strategic partnerships that helped solidify his rule across diverse regions. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking it was all sunshine and roses. Akbar faced significant resistance from factions within his own court, and from the regional powers he sought to integrate. The tension between maintaining a strong central authority and allowing local autonomy was a constant balancing act, like trying to keep a spinning plate on a stick while riding a unicycle. In this grand juggling act, Akbar's court became a stage where politics and culture danced in a delicate waltz. The emperor's love for the arts wasn't just a personal quirk, it was a political tool. By patronizing artists, poets, and scholars from different backgrounds, he fostered a sense of unity and identity that transcended regional divisions. His court was like the ultimate TED talk event, where ideas flowed as freely as the wine, and cultural exchange was the order of the day. Yet, the legend of Akbar the Great isn't just about a ruler with a penchant for reform and fine art. He was a leader who understood the power of narrative, one who could spin a story as deftly as he could weave a policy. This ability to craft a compelling narrative was perhaps his greatest weapon, one that allowed him to connect with his subjects on a level that went beyond mere governance. So, as we delve deeper into Akbar's reign, remember that the tale of this Mughal emperor is not just a chronicle of conquests and reforms. It's a story of a visionary who saw the tapestry of his empire as more than just threads of power and politics. It's the story of a ruler who understood that an empire's strength lay not just in its armies or its wealth, but in its ability to adapt, innovate, and inspire. And in a world where change was the only constant, Akbar the Great was a master of the game. As Akbar's empire grew more intricate than a Mughal tapestry, the man himself was busy crafting a new kind of art, one that went beyond paint and poems. He was painting a canvas of coexistence, and the medium was his policy of Salaikal, or universal peace. This wasn't just a catchy slogan to slap on a banner during a parade. No, it was a radical idea that aimed to stitch together a quilt of religious tolerance in an era when religious tensions could flare up faster than a jail-buy in hot oil. Picture this, a court where Sunni and Shia Muslims, Hindus, Jains, and even Jesuits were all elbowing for a seat at the table. An interfaith potluck, if you will. Akbar's vision was a society where peace wasn't just the absence of war, but a vibrant tapestry woven from the threads of different faiths and cultures. It's like he was running the original United Colors of Benetton ad campaign, but with more turbans and fewer turtlenecks. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Akbar wasn't some sandal-wearing, peace sign-flashing hippie. His Salaikal was as much a political chess move as it was a moral philosophy. By promoting religious harmony, he was actually reinforcing the stability of his empire, creating a sense of unity among his diverse subjects. It was less about singing, "Kumbaya," and more about ensuring the empire didn't implode like a poorly constructed sandcastle. But Akbar didn't stop there. In a move that would make even the most eccentric religious leaders raise an eyebrow, Akbar decided to create his own spiritual path, the Dynasty, or religion of God. Now, before you imagine Akbar as some self-styled guru in a flowing robe, let's clarify. Dynasty wasn't a new religion per se, but rather an ethical system that cherry-picked the best bits from the major faiths of the time. Think of it as a theological smoothie blended with ingredients from Islam, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, and Christianity, all served with a side of imperial authority. The appeal of Dynasty lay in its emphasis on moral values over dogma, encouraging virtues like piety, wisdom, and abstinence from worldly desires. However, despite its noble intentions, it didn't quite catch on like wildfire. With a membership list shorter than a celebrity's marriage vows, only about 18 elite followers signed up. Dynasty was more of a boutique belief system than a mass movement. But hey, it was less about the quantity and more about the quality of its adherents, right? This brings us to the legend versus reality of Akbar's reputation as a tolerant ruler. While it's tempting to view him as some kind of pre-modern liberal icon, the truth is a bit murkier. Yes, Akbar abolished the jizya, a tax on non-Muslims, and welcomed religious debates at his court like they were prime-time TV shows. Yet, he was also a shrewd political operator who knew that promoting religious tolerance was as much about quelling potential rebellions as it was about personal enlightenment. His tolerance was both genuine and strategic, a balancing act that would make any modern politician nod in appreciation. But Akbar's savvy didn't stop at religious reforms. His matrimonial alliances were as calculated as a game of risk, using marriage as a tool to secure alliances and consolidate power. His nuptials with Rajput princesses were not just romantic gestures, they were strategic masterstrokes. These unions helped integrate powerful Rajput kingdoms into his empire ensuring that potential adversaries became loyal allies. It was like marrying into the family of your biggest competitor to ensure they didn't undermine your startup empire. Take his marriage to Jardha Bai, for instance. This wasn't just a love story fit for Bollywood. It was a political maneuver that cemented Akbar's ties with one of the most formidable Rajput clans. By marrying into the Rajput aristocracy, Akbar didn't just gain a queen, he gained an army of allies ready to defend the Mughal throne. It was like acquiring a new province without firing a single cannonball. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of these alliances, but let's remember they were as much about power as they were about love. Akbar's approach to marriage diplomacy was a calculated strategy to ensure that his empire was a cohesive whole, rather than a collection of rival fiefdoms. It's the kind of political acumen that would give modern-day diplomats a run for their money. Yet, Akbar wasn't just some Machiavellian matchmaker. His marriages often led to genuine cultural exchanges, where Mughal and Rajput traditions intermingled, creating a unique fusion that enriched both societies. His court became a cultural melting pot where Persian miniatures and Rajput art coexisted, and where the strains of a sitar could dance harmoniously with the beat of a tabla. In the grand scheme of things, Akbar's reign was like a game of three-dimensional chess, where every move was calculated to maintain harmony and stability across a vast and diverse empire. His policies of religious tolerance and strategic marriages were not just acts of benevolence, but essential components of a larger strategy to create an empire that was as robust as it was diverse. So, as we continue to unravel the tapestry of Akbar's reign, remember that this was a ruler who understood the art of balance between power and peace, tradition and innovation, the legend and the reality. It was a balancing act that not only defined his rule, but left an indelible mark on the Indian subcontinent, one that would endure long after his passing. Stay tuned, because the story of Akbar the Great is far from over, and there's still much more to explore in the annals of this intriguing historical figure. Akbar's story wouldn't be complete without diving into his military exploits, which were as grand as they were gritty. We're talking about a guy who expanded the Mughal Empire to cover over 5 million square miles by the time he was done, roughly the size of modern-day India if you're looking for a frame of reference. But let's not get carried away with visions of glorious cavalry charges and heroic last stands. The reality of Akbar's military campaigns was a mix of brilliant strategy, brutal force, and yes, a fair share of bloodshed. First, on the docket, the siege of Chittorgarh in 1567, a battle that could fill an entire season of a historical drama series. Think Game of Thrones, with more elephants and less CGI. Chittorgarh was a fortress of legendary stature, held by the fiercely independent Rajputs who were as renowned for their valor as they were for their mustaches. Akbar, never one to shy away from a challenge, saw the fort as a key to dominating the strategic region of Muir. Now, if you're imagining catapults launching flaming projectiles and warriors clashing swords under a blazing sun, you're not entirely wrong. But Akbar's strategy was less about brute force and more about siege warfare 101. He deployed cannons, big, booming, and very effective, to breach the walls, while his forces cut off supplies to the fortress, slowly starving the defenders. Wasn't the most romantic way to win a battle, but when it comes to war, practicality often trumps poetry. The siege lasted several months, and the Rajputs, true to their reputation, resisted fiercely. But in February 1568, the inevitable happened. The fort fell, and Akbar claimed victory. The aftermath, however, was less than glorious. As was the grim custom of the time, the invading forces committed what can only be described as a massacre, with thousands of defenders and civilians perishing in the chaos. The human cost of Akbar's ambition was staggering, a stark reminder that empire building often leaves a bloody trail. But Akbar wasn't just about sieges and skirmishes. He was also a master of psychological warfare. In his campaigns, he often preferred diplomacy over destruction, offering terms that seemed too good to be true, because sometimes they were. He'd send envoys with promises of autonomy and tax breaks, turning potential foes into allies. It was a shrewd move, like offering free Wi-Fi to get people into your coffee shop, knowing that once they're in, they're not leaving anytime soon. Let's take his conquest of Gujarat in 1573, for instance. The region was a prosperous hub of trade and culture, and Akbar wanted it under his thumb. Now, instead of launching a full-scale invasion, he played it cool, negotiating with local rulers and promising protection and prosperity under Mughal rule. The result: the local nobility fell in line, and Gujarat's ports became valuable jewels in Akbar's imperial crown. It was a textbook case of winning hearts and minds, or, at the very least, winning wallets. However, the expansion of the Mughal Empire wasn't just a series of clean victories and clever negotiations. The campaign in the Deccan Plateau, for example, was a quagmire of logistical nightmares and stubborn resistance. The region was a patchwork of sultanates and kingdoms, each with its own ambitions and alliances. Akbar's forces faced a grueling challenge, akin to solving a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. In the Deccan, Akbar employed a mix of military might and political maneuvering. He sent his trusted generals to lead the charge, ensuring that his forces were as diverse as the empire itself, with contingents of Rajputs, Afghans, and even local warriors. But the campaign dragged on for years, a costly venture that drained resources and tested the limits of Mughal endurance. It was a harsh lesson that even emperors couldn't always bend the world to their will. Yet, Akbar's military endeavors weren't just about expanding borders. They were about consolidating power. Each conquest wasn't merely a line on a map, but a step toward building a cohesive realm. His campaigns were followed by efforts to integrate new territories into the empire's administrative framework, ensuring that the newly acquired lands didn't just become rebellious backwaters. And here's where Akbar's genius truly shone. He knew that lasting control required more than just soldiers and forts. It needed infrastructure, a bureaucracy that could manage the sprawling empire. So, along with warriors, he dispatched administrators and tax collectors, laying down roads and fostering trade. It was like setting up a franchise. Success wasn't just about opening new branches. It was about making sure they thrived. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking Akbar's expansion was all fair play and good intentions. His campaigns left scars on the landscape, both physical and cultural. Each victory was accompanied by the displacement of peoples, the destruction of heritage, and the imposition of new norms. The conquered lands bore the weight of Mughal rule, even as they contributed to its riches. The romanticized tales of conquest often gloss over the harsh reality that empire building is a messy, brutal business. Akbar, for all his vision and charisma, was a part of this cycle. His military campaigns were a testament to his ambition, his strategic brilliance, and his willingness to wield power with an iron fist when necessary. Yet, for every fortress he captured, and every kingdom he annexed, Akbar also left a legacy of integration and adaptation. His empire was a mosaic of cultures, languages, and traditions, a testament to his belief that diversity was not a weakness, but a strength. It was a vision that would continue to shape the Indian subcontinent long after his reign. So, as we look back on Akbar's military campaigns, let's remember them for what they were: a complex tapestry of strategy, ambition, and consequence. They were grand, gritty, and yes, sometimes glorious, but they were also a reminder that the price of empire can never be paid in gold alone. The story of Akbar the Great is far from over, and as we peel back the layers, we find a ruler whose legacy is as multifaceted as the empire he forged. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises to be just as intriguing. And so, the curtain draws on the saga of Akbar the Great, a man who built an empire that was as much a mosaic of cultures as it was a colossus of power. By the time he took his final breath on October 27, 1605, Akbar had crafted a legacy that would echo through the annals of history like the reverberations of a distant drum. His death marked the end of an era, but the empire he left behind was a testament to his vision, stretching over 3 million square kilometers and home to an estimated 100 million souls, no small feat by any measure. Now, if you were expecting Akbar's death to be a dramatic affair complete with ominous portents and political intrigue, you're in for a surprise. The truth is, his passing was as mundane as they come. He fell ill with dysentery, an ailment that was less Shakespearean tragedy and more, oh, the irony, for a ruler of his stature. Yet, in those final days, Akbar's thoughts must have wandered through the corridors of his accomplishments, each one a pillar holding up the empire he so meticulously crafted. But what did the empire look like as the 16th century drew to a close? Well, Imagine a realm where the cultural richness rivaled the wealth of Croesus, a place where Persian poetry mingled with Indian art, and where the sound of the cedar was as common as the clatter of elephant feet. Akbar's policies of religious tolerance and administrative reform had left the Mughal Empire not only stable, but thriving, its coffers brimming with the spoils of trade and tribute. The Mansabdari system, that ingenious bit of bureaucratic wizardry, was still the backbone of the empire's administration, ensuring that power was distributed like a well-baked pie, with each slice going to the deserving noble. This was no feudal free-for-all. It was a meritocratic machine that kept the wheels of governance greased and turning. And let's not forget his economic reforms, which had standardized taxation in a way that would make any modern economist nod in grudging respect. Akbar's revenue system was the envy of the world, a model of efficiency that allowed the empire to fund everything from grand architectural projects to military campaigns. Yet, for all his accomplishments, Akbar's legacy is a tapestry of myths and realities. The romanticized image of the benevolent ruler who could charm a cobra and convince it to dance is appealing, but it glosses over the grit of his reign. The truth is, Akbar was a master of realpolitik, a man who understood that ruling an empire required more than just grand gestures and good intentions. It required a delicate balance of force and diplomacy, of carrot and stick. Take, for instance, his policy of Salai-Kul. While it's easy to view this as a purely altruistic endeavor, the reality is that Akbar was playing a long game. Religious tolerance was a means to an end, a way to ensure that his empire didn't implode under the weight of its own diversity. Similarly, his creation of the Din-i-Ilahi, while noble in its intent, was as much about consolidating power as it was about spiritual enlightenment. It was an experiment in syncretism that, though it fizzled out after his death, highlighted Akbar's willingness to innovate, to think beyond the constraints of his time. And then there's the matter of his military campaigns. For all the tales of glory and conquest, the reality was often bloody and brutal. Akbar was a ruler who understood that expansion wasn't just about drawing lines on a map. It was about ensuring those lines held firm under pressure. His campaigns left a lasting impact on the Indian subcontinent, reshaping the political landscape in ways that would reverberate long after the last cannon had fired. But the true measure of Akbar's legacy lies not just in the stone and mortar of his empire, but in the seeds he planted for future generations. His grandson, Shah Jahan, would go on to build the Taj Mahal, an architectural marvel that stands as a testament to the cultural flowering that Akbar nurtured. The Mughal Empire, under Akbar's successors, continued to be a beacon of cultural and economic prosperity, its influence stretching far beyond its borders. Akbar's reign was a masterclass in the art of governance, a lesson in how to wield power with both wisdom and ruthlessness. It's a story that has been told and retold, each iteration adding a new layer to the legend. He's been romanticized in Bollywood films, immortalized in epic tales, and even compared to modern rulers. Yet, beneath the layers of myth, the reality of Akbar the Great is a complex tapestry woven from the threads of ambition, vision, and the relentless pursuit of empire. So, what can we learn from this Mughal maestro as we close the book on his story? Perhaps it's that true greatness lies not in the grandeur of one's conquests, but in the ability to forge unity from diversity, to see beyond the horizon and build a legacy that stands the test of time. Akbar's life reminds us that history is a living, breathing entity, shaped as much by the stories we tell as by the facts we uncover. His empire may have crumbled with time, but the echoes of his rule continue to resonate, a testament to a ruler who dared to dream big and more often than not made those dreams a reality. You wake up in ancient Greece and know there's no snooze button on this morning. The sun, your relentless alarm clock, is already climbing the Athenian sky with all the subtlety of a Spartan at a toga party. If you're a citizen, your day starts with a leisurely breakfast. Picture this, a meal that might include bread dipped in wine, maybe some olives or figs if you're lucky. It's a far cry from the modern avocado toast, but hey, it does the job. Then there's the cold splash of reality. If you're a slave, you're up before dawn, probably with a stomach as empty as a philosopher's promises. Your duties, the chores of a small army, stoking fires, fetching water, sweeping floors, basically anything that keeps the household running like a well-oiled chariot. The concept of Carlos Cagathos looms large over your morning like a philosophical hangover. This ideal of being both beautiful and virtuous was the ancient Greek version of having it all. For men, it was an expectation, not a compliment. Think of it as a relentless pressure to be both the Ryan Gosling and the Gandhi of your time. Physical fitness wasn't just a health goal, it was practically a civic duty. The gymnasia were full of men who were more oiled up than a Greek salad lifting weights that would make modern crossfitters nod in solemn respect. Because, of course, the guards were watching, and looking anything less than divine would be, well, ungodly. Now, let's talk about the economics of breakfast. Bread, the cornerstone of your morning meal, wasn't just a loaf, it was a statement. Made from barley, which was cheaper than wheat, bread reflected your place on the social ladder because wheat was for the wealthier citizens. Olives, they were the Mediterranean equivalent of gold, thanks to their role in everything from cooking to cosmetics. If you're a slave, your breakfast might be a bowl of pulse, a kind of porridge that's about as exciting as it sounds. It's not glamorous, but it fuels the labor that keeps the republic ticking. As you munch your bread or gulp your pulse, ponder the fact that the concept of leisure was a luxury reserved for the few. Citizens could afford to dawdle over breakfast and engage in political chatter or philosophical debates, while slaves were the silent engines of domestic life. This division of labor was as rigid as a Greek column, and just as foundational to society's structure. The roles were clear. Citizens were the thinkers, the decision-makers. Slaves were the doers, the unseen hands. While the citizen might discuss the latest news from the agora, the marketplace, the slave is unlikely to hear the day's gossip unless it's barked as an order. Speaking of the agora, it's the buzzing heart of Athenian life, where politics, commerce, and social interactions collide in a glorious melee. It's where you'd find Socrates annoying someone with questions, or a merchant trying to sell you something you don't need. In this world, the line between citizen and slave is not just social but economic. A citizen's wealth is often tied up in land, slaves, and the ability to participate in public life. Meanwhile, a slave's value is in their labor and obedience. There are no rags to riches stories here, just rags or riches. The economy is as stratified as a layer cake, with the sweet rewards reserved for the top tier. Now, let's debunk a romantic notion, the idea that ancient Greece was a bastion of democracy and equality. Sure, Athens had a democracy, but it was a democracy where only about 30,000 out of a population of 300,000 could vote. Women, slaves, and foreigners need not apply. It was more exclusive than a VIP room at a club. Democracy was for a select few, those who had the leisure to ponder governance rather than survive it. By now, the sun is fully up, and the city is alive with the sounds of trade, debate, and daily life. As you step into the day, remember that every choice, from what you eat to how you spend your morning, is a reflection of your place in this intricate social web. Whether you're a free citizen or a slave, the day ahead is shaped by roles as old as the hills of Athens themselves, roles that define not just what you do, but who you are in the eyes of society. And thus, your journey through the bustling heart of ancient Greece, the agora, begins. This isn't just a place, it's an entire mood. Imagine the energy of a modern stock exchange, but swap out the suits for togas and the blackberries for, well, actual blackberries. The agora is where democracy, commerce, society collide in a cacophony of shouting merchants, debating philosophers, and perhaps the odd goat bleeding in disapproval. Let's get one thing straight. The agora was not for the faint-hearted or the short-tempered. If you were a citizen, this was your social media, without the cat videos. Here, you'd rub elbows with everyone from the high-minded philosopher to the cunning merchant. But if you were a slave, your experience of the agora was more about running errands than running your mouth. You might be tasked with fetching olives, those little green nuggets of Mediterranean gold, or wine, which was basically the social lubricant of the ancient world. Fun fact, back then, wine was usually diluted with water, making it more like a sophisticated grape Kool-Aid than the full-bodied Merlot of today. Speaking of economics, let's break down the cost of living in ancient Greece. Olives, the ultimate symbol of peace and prosperity, didn't come cheap. A solid amphora of oil might set you back a few drachmas, which was no small change. Wine, on the other hand, was more accessible, the ancient equivalent of your budget-friendly boxed wine. The agora was where you'd haggle over these staples, trying to get the best price while dodging the philosophical musings of a nearby Socratic disciple. And let's be honest, nobody likes being guilt-tripped into enlightenment while they're trying to buy groceries. Now let's tackle a romantic myth, the idea that the agora was a democratic paradise where every citizen had a voice. Sure, if you were one of the roughly 30,000 eligible male citizens, you could debate the issues of the day until you were blue in the face. But remember, this was a society where your right to speak came with a hefty entrance fee, land ownership, military service, and a Y chromosome. Women, slaves, and medics, foreigners living in Athens, were as disenfranchised as a fish at a desert convention. So much for the cradle of democracy, right? More like a selective club with a very exclusive guest list. The agora was the epicenter of political gossip, where the fate of the city-state could turn on the outcome of a heated debate. Picture this, a crowd gathered around a loudspeaker, except the loudspeaker is actually a very animated orator with a penchant for dramatics. Here, policies were proposed, alliances formed, and reputations made or shattered faster than you could say, ostracize. And if you think modern politics is dramatic, try getting banished from your city-state because you ticked off the wrong people. Ostracism was the ancient version of being unfriended on Facebook, but with a 10-year cooling-off period. For the average citizen, the agora was also a place of intellectual stimulation. Philosophers like Socrates might be seen wandering around, probing the minds of anyone willing or unwilling to engage in a dialectical duel. If you were lucky, you might even catch a glimpse of a young Plato or Aristotle, the latter of whom would grow up to write treatises that still confound college students today. But if you were a slave, your philosophical musings were likely limited to wondering why the amphora you were carrying was so heavy. In this bustling hub, commerce and politics mingled with a level of intimacy that was practically scandalous. Merchants hawked their wares, everything from pottery to perfumes, while statesmen debated taxation and warfare strategies. The agora was an economic engine, crucial to the city's prosperity. Trade routes crisscrossed the Mediterranean, bringing goods from as far as Egypt and Persia. This was global trade before globalization was even a term, and the economy ticked along like a well-oiled chariot wheel, as long as you weren't crushed under it. But let's not forget the darker side of this economic machine, the reliance on slavery. The foundation of Athenian prosperity was built on the backs of slaves who had no voice, no vote, and certainly no access to the philosophical debates that shaped their lives. Slaves weren't just domestic servants. They were artisans, craftsmen, sometimes even teachers. It's a grim irony that a society so devoted to the pursuit of knowledge and beauty should rest on such inequitable ground. By now, the sun is high, and the agora is a symphony of commerce and debate. Citizens barter, argue, and philosophize, while slaves scurry about, the silent cogs in the democratic machine. As you navigate this ancient marketplace, remember, each step you take is a dance between myth and reality, between the ideal and the harsh truth. The agora is alive, a testament to the complexity of human society, where every choice and every voice, or lack thereof, echoes through the ages. This isn't just history. It's a mirror reflecting the timeless dance of power, economy, and human ambition. As the day in ancient Athens rolls on, the agora remains a whirlwind of human activity, evidence of a society that's as layered as a baklava. But let's pause for a moment and take a bite of something else, the social hierarchy. Much like the bread from breakfast, this hierarchy wasn't just a part of life, it was foundational. If you thought the line between citizen and slave was as clear-cut as a Spartan's haircut, think again. Greek society was a complex web of roles and rules, with citizens at the top basking in a sun of privilege that Zeus himself would envy. About 30,000 citizens, all male, held the keys to the democratic kingdom, while 270,000 others, women, slaves, and medics, watched from the sidelines, or rather, did the grunt work to keep the show running. It was societal multitasking at its finest, or perhaps its most exploitative. Now, let's talk about women, who were the unsung heroes of the ancient domestic sphere. Forget about striding through the agora discussing politics. Women were mostly confined to the private realm of the oikos, or household. Their duties, managing the home, raising children, and weaving, always with the weaving. These were the Pinterest boards of ancient Greek life, except there was no posting, just doing. The ideal woman was like Penelope from the Odyssey, weaving away and maintaining the home front while her husband gallivanted across the Aegean. If you're thinking that sounds like a bad dating profile, you're not far off. But let's dig deeper into the economic engine that truly powered Greek society. Slavery. Athens wasn't just a hub of democracy. It was a hub of slave labor. Slavery was so embedded in the economic structure that Plato, in his less than egalitarian wisdom, considered it a natural order of things. Slaves outnumbered citizens, forming a crucial part of the workforce. They worked in mines, fields, homes, and even the state's infrastructure projects. It wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was an economic necessity, much like coffee for a modern office worker. And here's where we debunk another myth, the romanticization of Greek democracy. Sure, Athens had the trappings of a democratic society, debates, votes, and public offices, but democracy was more of a members-only club. For every eligible citizen casting a vote, there were countless others silenced by the mere circumstance of birth. Even the word democracy rings hollow when you realize it was democracy for the few, by the few. It's like claiming you're sharing a pizza, but only giving out slices to those who own the pizzeria. Meanwhile, let's not forget about the medics, non-citizens living in Athens, often traders or skilled laborers. They contributed to the economy in significant ways, paying taxes and serving in the military, yet they were barred from owning land or participating in politics. They were like permanent guests at a party, enjoying some perks, but never staying for the real fun. Despite these harsh realities, the allure of ancient Greece remains. It's the birthplace of Western philosophy, drama, and art. But behind the marbled facades and philosophical musings lay a society built on exclusion and exploitation. It's like finding out your favorite rock band was lip-syncing all along, still great songs, but the magic dims a bit. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the agora, the city's social structure remains as rigid as the Parthenon's columns. Citizens return home, perhaps to a leisurely symposium, a drinking party with philosophical debates and entertainment. Women, on the other hand, will be preparing dinner, their domain far from the public eye. Slaves, ever the silent operators, continue their work, ensuring the evening flows smoothly. Yet, in this rigid world, cracks of dissent occasionally appear. Philosophers like Socrates, who famously questioned everything, nudged society towards introspection. His method of inquiry, the Socratic method, was as much a conversation starter as it was a political irritant. It's as if he was the original internet troll, but with more philosophical heft. In this dance of power and hierarchy, there's an undeniable tension between the ideals of beauty, wisdom, and virtue, and the grim realities of inequality and subjugation. The Athenians might have crafted their gods in their own image, but they also crafted a society that prioritized the few over the many. It's a reminder that history, much like life, is a series of contradictions, some glorious, others less so. As you navigate these ancient streets, remember, the grandeur of Athens wasn't just in its architecture or its ideas, but in its ability to reflect the best and worst of human nature. And while we may romanticize the past, it's crucial to see it in all its complexity, warts and all. Because at the end of the day, history is more than just a collection of dates and events. It's a mirror reflecting the timeless dance of power, economy, and human ambition. And just like that, as the sun dips lower, casting a golden glow over the city of Athens, we find ourselves wandering from the bustling agora to the quieter corners of Greek life. It's time to peek behind the curtains of the ancient world's brain trust, education, and culture. Spoiler alert, it's a mixed bag of philosophy, privilege, and a dash of inequality. So, let's unravel the tapestry of what it meant to be educated in ancient Greece, where not everyone got to sit at the intellectual table. First stop, the gymnasium. Now, before you start picturing a modern gym with treadmills and protein shakes, hold that thought. The ancient Greek gymnasium was more about shaping minds and bodies than six-pack abs. It was where young male citizens, yes, the gender exclusivity is real, spent their afternoons learning to be the embodiment of Carlos Kagathos, that classic Greek combo of beauty and virtue. Here, education and physical training went hand in hand, much like peanut butter and jelly, but with more sweat and less snack. These gymnasia weren't just about pumping iron. They were the intellectual playgrounds of the elite. Boys aged around 7 to 14 were taught by private tutors, learning everything from geometry and music to gymnastics and rhetoric. And if you've ever had to sit through a high school geometry class, you'll appreciate that these boys didn't just learn about triangles. They were taught how to use them to debate philosophical concepts. Because, obviously, nothing says enlightened society like arguing the Pythagorean theorem. But here's the kicker. Access to this education was as exclusive as a pop star's VIP party. Only freeborn boys of citizen families could partake in these lessons. Girls, well, they were busy mastering the domestic arts, with their education largely confined to the home. And slaves, their academic pursuits were about as non-existent as a Spartan's patience for small talk. Now, let's take a swerve into the world of symposiums. These were the evening intellectual gatherings where men engaged in witty banter, philosophical debates, and of course, copious amounts of wine. Imagine a TED talk, but with more togas and fewer PowerPoint slides. The symposium was a cornerstone of Greek culture, a place where ideas flowed as freely as the diluted wine, which was roughly 2 parts water to 1 part wine. Because who wants to be tipsy in tunics, but don't romanticize it too much? Symposiums were an exclusive club, and women were generally persona non grata unless they were entertainers or courtesans, known as hederai. The hederai were educated, often more so than the average Athenian wife, and could participate in the discussions. Yet, they were still on the fringes of societal respectability. It's like being invited to the party, but only being allowed to comment on the playlist. And let's not forget the elephant in the room, or rather, the slave in the household. While citizens were engaging in lofty dialogues, slaves were busy serving the wine and cleaning up the philosophical crumbs. Some slaves were educated and acted as tutors or scribes, but they were the exception rather than the rule. Most were stuck in the practical realm, far removed from the ivory towers of Greek thought. Speaking of ivory towers, let's talk about the big names of Greek philosophy. Socrates, that notorious gadfly, never wrote a word himself, but his ideas were immortalized by his star pupil, Plato. Plato's academy wasn't just an institution, it was the birthplace of Western philosophy. But before you get visions of open doors and free lectures, remember, this was still a place for the privileged few. The academy was more exclusive than an Ivy League school, with entry determined by your social standing and connections. Of course, must tackle the myth of the completely enlightened society. Ancient Greece is often depicted as the cradle of wisdom, a beacon of intellectual light in a dark world. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find that access to this enlightenment was strictly controlled. The pursuit of knowledge was a privilege, not a right, with barriers as solid as the stone walls of the Acropolis. So, what about the education of the average Joe, or in this case, the average Diomes? For most, education was practical, passed down through apprenticeships and daily life. A farmer learned to till the land from his father, a potter from his master. This hands-on learning was valuable, yet it rarely included the philosophical musings of the elite. It's like being taught to cook, but never getting to taste the haute cuisine. As the evening shadows lengthen, the duality of Greek education becomes stark. On one hand, you have the pursuit of intellectual and physical excellence among the citizen elite. On the other, there's the stark reality of exclusion, where women, slaves, and medics were relegated to the sidelines of this grand intellectual theater. The gap between the ideal of an enlightened society and the reality was as wide as the Aegean Sea. And yet, despite these disparities, the legacy of Greek education and culture endures. The ideas forged in this era laid the foundations for Western philosophy, science, and art. It's a testament to the power of ideas, even when those ideas were accessible to only a lucky few. It's like admiring a beautiful painting, knowing that only certain people ever got to hold the brush. As the day draws to a close, the city of Athens hums with the echoes of debates, the clinking of symposium cups, and the quiet resolve of those on the edges of society. It's a world of contradictions, where knowledge is both a beacon and a barrier. And as you ponder these complexities, remember, history is not just a tale of what was but a reflection of what can be learned. The past may be set in stone, but its lessons are fluid, shaping the world we build today. As the final rays of the sun dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Athens, it's time to swap the day's toil for a bit of revelry. The ancient Greeks knew how to kick back, and they had options aplenty, from the highbrow to the downright boozy. Let's start with the theater, the original Netflix binge, but with fewer cliffhangers and more tragic endings. Theater was a cultural cornerstone in Athens, and the city was renowned for its dramatic festivals, like the Dionysia, held in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine and festivity. This wasn't just a night at the movies. It was a civic event. Theaters like the one at Epidaurus could seat up to 14,000 spectators, all craning their necks to catch the latest tragedy by Aeschylus or a comedy by Aristophanes. The performances were a mix of poetic dialogue, music, and elaborate masks, with plots featuring more twists than a pretzel. But before you wax lyrical about the democratic nature of theatre, know this. The best seats were reserved for the elite, with the hoi polloi left to squint from the nosebleed section. And yes, even in ancient times, people complained about ticket prices. Now, if the theatre was the intellectuals' playground, the symposium was where the philosophical and the inebriated collided. Picture a room filled with reclining citizens, goblets in hand, engaging in a bit of serious debate, right after a rousing chorus of drinking songs. This was where ideas flowed as freely as the wine, diluted with water to ensure the evening lasted longer than a Spartan's haircut. For the elite, this was bonding time, a chance to discuss everything from politics to poetry while munching on delicacies like honey cakes and figs. But let's not romanticize. Symposiums were as exclusive as a VIP lounge, and women were generally only present as entertainers. So much for equality, right? Meanwhile, slaves bustled about, ensuring the wine never ran dry and the food kept coming. They were the invisible hands making the elite's leisure possible, a stark reminder of the inequalities underpinning Athenian society. Now, speaking of those slaves, their idea of relaxation was a bit different. Free time, when it existed, was often spent tending to personal tasks or resting from the relentless demands of their duties. While the citizens engaged in intellectual debates, slaves might gather in small groups, sharing stories or songs from their diverse backgrounds. It was a modest respite, far removed from the lavish banquets and philosophical musings of their masters. Yet, despite their different worlds, slaves were an integral part of Greek life, contributing to its cultural and economic tapestry. They were the craftsmen, the artisans, the unseen architects of the city's prosperity. It's a grim irony that a culture that celebrated freedom and thought was built on the backs of those denied both. As the night deepens and the city settles into the comforting hum of nocturnal life, it's worth reflecting on the lasting impact of Greek culture. This is a civilization that gave us democracy, philosophy, and the Olympics, but also a society defined by stark inequalities. It's a duality that resonates even today, the balance between celebrated achievements and the societal inequities that fueled them. Greek culture has left a legacy that endures, a testament to the enduring power of ideas and art. Yet, as we celebrate these achievements, it's crucial to remember the full picture. The grandeur of Athens wasn't just in its marble temples or its storied debates, but in the complexity of its society, a complexity that included voices both heard and silenced. So, as you close the chapter on your day in ancient Greece, remember that history is a tapestry woven with threads of both light and shadow. The myths and realities of this ancient world offer a mirror to our own, urging us to ponder the balance between progress and justice. Because, at the end of the day, the past is not just a foreign country. It's a reflection of our own aspirations and failures, a reminder that the dance of power, economy, and human ambition is as timeless as history itself. In the bustling chaos of 10th century China, where dynasties rose and fell faster than a soap opera plot twist, a man named Zhao Quanjian decided he'd had enough of the political merry-go-round. By 960 AD, the later Zhou dynasty had just about worn out its welcome, and Zhao, a seasoned general with a penchant for leadership and a knack for avoiding the guillotine, took matters into his own hands. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill coup, though. Oh no, Zhao was a man with a plan, and he was about to pull off what history remembers as the coup with a conscience. Let's set the scene. Zhao, serving under the later Zhou dynasty, found himself in a classic medieval dilemma. The empire was fragmented, rival warlords were as common as Starbucks in a major city, and the reigning emperor was a child. Enter Zhao, the man with the charisma of a rock star, and the strategic mind of a chess grandmaster. Legend has it that one night, his troops, probably tired of the chaos, convinced him to take the throne. They even handed him a yellow robe, a classic sign of imperial favor, because nothing says I'm in charge like a new outfit. Thus, Zhao Quanjian became Emperor Tezu of Song, marking the beginning of the Song dynasty. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. While it sounds like a smooth transition, unifying China was about as easy as herding cats. The country was a patchwork of territories controlled by various warlords, each with their own ideas of governance, often involving swords and a lot of shouting. Tezu had to consolidate power without sparking a civil war, a bit like trying to organize a family reunion without starting a political debate. In classic Tezu fashion, he approached this challenge with a mix of diplomacy and strategic marriages. He didn't just rely on the sword. He knew that sometimes peace was best served with a side of negotiation. And here's where it gets interesting. Economic reform was his secret weapon. Forget armies. Tezu decided to make farming the new rock and roll. Picture this. The Chinese economy at the time was like a neglected plant. It needed water, sunlight, and maybe a little bit of TLC. Enter agricultural advancements. The Song dynasty didn't just stop at growing rice. They turned it into an art form. They figured out how to produce more crops more efficiently, thanks to some nifty irrigation techniques that would make even modern farmers nod in approval. The Grand Canal became a lifeline, transporting goods across the empire. Think of it as the ancient world's version of Amazon Prime, but with less cardboard waste. But why does any of this matter? Well, here's the kicker. This agricultural boom wasn't just about more food, it was about power. More crops meant more money, and more money meant more influence. Suddenly, the Song dynasty had the resources to fund technological innovations, military campaigns, and the kind of lavish court life that would put any reality TV show to shame. Of course, no story is complete without tackling a few myths. While it's tempting to think of the Song dynasty as a utopia of peaceful farmers and wise emperors, the reality was far grittier. Power struggles were ongoing, and the threat of invasion loomed large. But the Song dynasty managed to thrive, in part because they understood the power of economic stability. They knew that happy farmers made for a happy empire, and they leveraged that knowledge to maintain control and influence. So, as we wrap up our introduction to the Song dynasty, let's remember Emperor Tezu not just as a man who seized an empire with a yellow robe, but as a leader who saw the potential in turning agriculture into a political and economic powerhouse. He wasn't just playing the game, he was redefining the rules, setting the stage for a dynasty that would leave a lasting mark on China's history. The Song dynasty didn't just rest on its agricultural laurels. It was gearing up for a tech renaissance that would put even the most ambitious Silicon Valley startups to shame. With their newfound agricultural wealth, the Song dynasty set its sights on innovation, a word that in the 21st century might conjure images of sleek gadgets and hipster coffee shops, but back then meant using fire to propel things into the sky. Let's start with gunpowder, the explosive mix of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal that was discovered quite by accident. Legend has it that alchemists, in their quest for the elixir of immortality, stumbled upon something far more combustible. Imagine the scene. A bunch of ancient chemists, probably expecting a puff of smoke at best, suddenly find themselves with a mini-volcano on their hands. So, naturally, the Song dynasty engineers thought, hey, let's strap this stuff to arrows. A decision that would eventually rewrite the manual on warfare. By the 11th century, gunpowder was being used in everything from rockets to fire lances, and it wasn't long before militaries around the world caught on. But here's the kicker. While we might picture gunpowder as the tool of imperial conquest, for the average rice farmer, it was more a tale of fireworks than firearms. Gunpowder initially made its mark in the realm of entertainment, lighting up the night skies with pyrotechnics long before it became a staple of battlefield strategy. So, while the emperors were busy figuring out how to weaponize it, farmers were probably watching these displays with a mix of awe and terror, wondering if their quiet nights were a thing of the past. But gunpowder was just the opening act. Enter the magnetic compass, a navigational game-changer that would set the Song dynasty on course for maritime dominance. The compass, with its eerily accurate iron needle floating in a bowl of water, was a marvel of simplicity and elegance. And while today we casually swipe our smartphones to find the nearest coffee shop, back then, this was the equivalent of a GPS. The Song Dynasty used it to expand their trade networks far and wide, reaching as far as the Arabian Peninsula and the east coast of Africa. Suddenly, their economy was no longer just rice and silk. It was a global enterprise. For the average farmer, this meant a bustling marketplace with exotic goods and new opportunities. Sure, the compass might not have directly affected their ploughing techniques, but it did mean that their surplus crops could fetch a pretty penny at markets they'd never have dreamed of before. The world was getting smaller, and the Song were beginning to realize the power of international trade, not just as a means of economic growth, but as a cultural exchange that would enrich their society in countless ways. Next up in our tech extravaganza, movable type printing. If Gutenberg is the rock star of the printing revolution in the West, then Bai Sheng is the unsung hero in the East. In the 11th century, Bai Sheng developed a system of movable type using clay, a process that was as painstaking as it was groundbreaking. This wasn't just about printing books faster, it was about democratizing knowledge. Suddenly, ideas could spread like wildfire, and literacy rates began to climb. Think of it as the ancient world's version of going viral, but without the cat memes. For the average rice farmer, the implications were profound. Education, once the privilege of the elite, started to trickle down to the masses. They could learn new farming techniques, read about innovations, or even get a peek into the imperial decrees that governed their lives. It was an information revolution that would set the stage for the cultural blossoming of later dynasties. But let's not get too romantic about this tech boom. While the Song Dynasty was busy innovating, they were also facing the harsh realities of power dynamics. The allure of gunpowder and rockets was matched by the constant threat of northern invaders. The Jurchens and the Mongols weren't exactly sending flowers and thank you notes, more like arrows and battering rams. The Song were in a perpetual state of defense, pouring resources into military innovations while trying to keep the economy afloat. This constant push and pull between progress and survival defined the Song era. They were a dynasty of contradictions, balancing the elegance of porcelain and poetry with the gritty necessities of war. Their engineers and inventors were tasked with solving problems that were as existential as they were technical. In a way, they were the original startup founders, scrappy, resourceful, and forever hustling to stay ahead of the curve. So, as we wrap up this segment of our journey through the Song Dynasty, let's remember them not just as inventors and visionaries, but as a people navigating the complex dance between innovation and survival. They didn't just invent technologies, they reshaped society, one explosive discovery at a time. And as we look forward, we'll see how these innovations continue to ripple through history, leaving a legacy that would echo far beyond the borders of their empire. As the Song Dynasty continued its delicate waltz between innovation and survival, they stumbled upon another opportunity that would redefine their place in the world: trade and urbanization. Picture the streets of Kaifeng, the Song capital, bustling with life like Times Square on New Year's Eve, but swap the LED screens for lanterns and the ball drop for the occasional stray firecracker. By the turn of the millennium, Kaifeng was a thriving metropolis, a testament to the Song's economic prowess. With a population pushing 1 million, yes, 1 million, in an era when most cities were little more than glorified villages, Kaifeng was a city that knew how to hustle. It was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and most importantly, goods. You could find everything from Persian rugs to spices from India, all without leaving the city limits. If you had a hankering for some exotic silks or the latest in Song porcelain, Kaifeng was your one-stop shop. Now, how did the Song manage to turn their cities into economic powerhouses? The secret wasn't just in their savvy urban planning or their penchant for grand architecture. It was in their policies. The Song government had a keen sense of economic strategy, implementing a system that encouraged trade like never before. They reduced taxes on merchants and promoted the use of paper money, a revolutionary concept at the time, making transactions smoother and the economy more fluid. It was as if they had read the future and decided to skip straight to the invention of the credit card. But let's not get carried away with the romance of a thriving ancient city. While the streets of Kaifeng were bustling, they were also chaotic. The early morning air was filled with the shouts of merchants hawking their wares and the occasional scuffle over a bad deal. The wealth that flowed through the city brought with it a new set of challenges. As the Song Dynasty's coffers filled, so did the pockets of a burgeoning merchant class. This new social group started to wield a power that was traditionally reserved for the aristocracy. The merchant class was like the nouveau rich crashing a high society ball, uninvited but impossible to ignore. This rise in commerce had its darker side, too. The economic boom that fueled the cities also widened the gap between the rich and the poor. While some merchants were draped in silks and lounging on luxurious furniture, the average laborer was still toiling away for a pittance. The Song knew they were playing with fire, and they had to keep a tight grip on the social order to prevent the kind of unrest that could topple a dynasty faster than you can say trade deficit. And speaking of trade deficits, let's talk about the Song's maritime ambitions. With a coastline stretching thousands of miles, the Song dynasty wasn't content to let their ships collect dust in the harbor. Instead, they set their sights on dominating the seas. And boy, did they deliver. The Song Navy became one of the most formidable maritime forces of the time, not just because they had the ships, but because they had the know-how. They understood the importance of controlling the sea lanes, not just for defense, but for trade. The magnetic compass, which they had perfected, became their secret weapon. It allowed them to navigate the treacherous waters of the South China Sea with precision, reaching as far as the Arabian Peninsula and the East African coast. Suddenly, the Song were exporting their goods to the farthest corners of the known world, making a tidy profit in the process. This was globalization, before anyone had even coined the term, and the Song were at the helm, steering China into a new era of interconnectedness. But here's where things get interesting. While the Song were busy raking in the riches of international trade, they were also inadvertently sowing the seeds of their own economic challenges. The influx of foreign goods meant that Chinese silver was flowing out of the country at an alarming rate. It was a classic case of too much of a good thing, and the Song found themselves facing a trade imbalance that would make modern economists wince. In the midst of all this, the Song were also laying down the foundations for something else: capitalism. Now, don't roll your eyes just yet. While it might seem a stretch to label this era as the dawn of capitalism, the Song was certainly flirting with its principles. The rise of a market economy, the importance of trade, and the power of a moneyed class all hinted at a system that wouldn't fully blossom until centuries later. The Song merchants were the original entrepreneurs, taking risks and reaping rewards in a way that would make Silicon Valley blush. Yet, despite all the prosperity and progress, the Song era was also a time of profound inequality. The wealth generated by trade didn't trickle down to everyone, and the social fabric was fraying at the edges. As the rich got richer, the poor struggled to keep up, and the government was left juggling a volatile mix of prosperity and poverty. It was a balancing act that required constant vigilance, lest the whole system come crashing down. So, as we continue our journey through the Song dynasty, remember that their legacy is as much about the challenges they faced as the triumphs they achieved. They were a society teetering on the edge of modernity, grappling with issues that resonate even today. The Song dynasty didn't just shape China, they helped shape the world, one bustling market at a time. And as we delve deeper into their story, we'll see how their innovations and struggles laid the groundwork for future generations, proving that history is never as simple as it seems. As the Song dynasty deftly juggled its economic and political ambitions, it also found time to dabble in the finer things in life, art and culture. You might say the Song era was like the Renaissance's quirky cousin who preferred ink to oil paint and found inspiration in tea leaves rather than wine. So, was the Song dynasty the original hipster hotspot? Well, it wasn't all oolong and hacus. There were some pretty gritty undercurrents beneath the Zen surface. First, let's set the scene. Imagine a world where poetry was the social media of its day, and a well-crafted verse could elevate your status faster than a viral tweet. The Song dynasty was a veritable playground for poets, painters, and philosophers. This was the era when Su Shi and his contemporaries were dropping poetic bars like they were in a literary rap battle. Su Shi, better known as Su Dongpo, was the Kanai West of his time, controversial, prolific, and often misunderstood. His work wasn't just about pretty words. It was a commentary on society, politics, and the human condition, wrapped in aesthetic beauty. But here's the kicker. While the song courts were lavishing praise and patronage on these artists, they were also keeping a tight leash. The imperial control was like that nosy neighbor peering over the fence, always ready to squash anything that smelled too much like dissent. Sure, the song emperors loved a good landscape painting, but only if it didn't come with a side of political critique. Artists had to walk a fine line, balancing creativity with the realities of censorship. One wrong brushstroke or a misinterpreted metaphor could land you in hot water, or worse, exile. Take the story of Wen Tang, a painter whose bamboo brushwork was legendary. His art was celebrated, yet his life was far from peaceful. Like many artists of his time, Wen had to navigate the ever-watchful eyes of the imperial court. He managed to do so with the deftness of a juggler, painting serene scenes that veiled subtle critiques of the status quo. It was an art form in itself, creating beauty while sidestepping the political landmines of the day. Meanwhile, the Song dynasty's love affair with ceramics was reaching new heights. Porcelain wasn't just a product, it was a status symbol, the kind that could rival today's designer handbags. The artisans in places like Jingdezhen were the unsung heroes of this era, churning out pieces that were as much about innovation as they were about form. They perfected the art of high-fired porcelain, crafting pieces that were so delicate they seemed to defy the laws of physics. These weren't just any old dishes. They were masterpieces that graced the tables of the elite and were shipped across the seas to wow foreign markets. Here's where it gets interesting. While we often romanticize these artistic achievements, the reality was a bit more, shall we say, gritty. The artisans toiling in the kilns weren't exactly living the high life. Their work was labor-intensive, demanding precision and patience in equal measure. The pressure to produce perfection was immense, and mistakes were not just frowned upon. They could be financially ruinous. It was a high-stakes game with little room for error, and the artisans paid the price in sweat and toil. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, these pressures, the Song dynasty nurtured a vibrant cultural scene that rippled through time. It was an era of experimentation, where artists and intellectuals pushed boundaries even as they were bound by them. This paradoxical dance between freedom and restriction created a tension that fueled creativity. The Song era wasn't just about the art itself. It was about the struggle to create in a world that was simultaneously inspiring and oppressive. The Song dynasty also saw the rise of Neo-Confucianism, a philosophical movement that sought to harmonize traditional Confucian ideas with Buddhist and Taoist thought. Think of it as the philosophical equivalent of a fusion restaurant, blending flavors to create something new and exciting. Scholars like Zhu Zai became the intellectual rock stars of their day, shaping thought in ways that would influence Chinese society for centuries. But even these scholars weren't immune to the tight grip of imperial oversight. They had to balance their quest for knowledge with the political realities of their environment, always careful to toe the line between innovation and insubordination. So, was the Song dynasty a peaceful cultural haven? Not exactly. It was a complex tapestry of artistic triumph and political tension, a world where beauty and brutality coexisted in intricate balance. It's easy to look back and see only the shimmering surface, the elegant calligraphy, and the serene landscapes. But beneath that surface was a world of struggle and resilience, where artists and thinkers navigated a labyrinth of constraints to leave their indelible mark on history. As we continue this journey through the Song dynasty, remember that their cultural legacy wasn't just crafted in the serene confines of a scholar's garden or the quiet solitude of a painter's studio. It was forged in the crucible of conflict and compromise, in the spaces where creativity met control. It's a story of defiance and determination, of artists who dared to dream even when their dreams were bound by the chains of imperial authority. And it's a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, that the past is full of complexities and contradictions that continue to resonate today. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this vibrant era, exploring the many layers of a dynasty that was as much about survival as it was about splendor. And now, as the curtain falls on our exploration of the Song dynasty's artistic and cultural highs, we find ourselves at the entrance of its decline, a dramatic descent worthy of the grandest Shakespearean tragedy. The Song dynasty's collapse was not a sudden plunge, but a slow unraveling, a tale of political missteps and military misadventures that left historians shaking their heads in collective disbelief. The stage was set by a series of leadership blunders that would have made any court jester cringe. You see, while the Song were busy perfecting porcelain and penning poetry, they somewhat neglected the art of effective governance. It was as if they were trying to juggle flaming torches while wearing silk gloves, beautiful to watch, but inevitably disastrous. The emperors, especially in the latter part of the dynasty, were often more concerned with palace intrigues and scholarly pursuits than with the gritty business of running an empire. This detachment from reality left the door wide open for administrative chaos and corruption. By the 13th century, the Song were facing mounting pressure from all sides. Internally, the government was riddled with corruption that would make a modern-day scandal look like a minor hiccup. Officials were selling favors like they were going out of style, and the central government was hemorrhaging money faster than it could print paper currency. Externally, the Song were hemmed in by aggressive neighbors who weren't exactly sending over fruit baskets. Enter stage right, the Mongols. Led by the infamous Kublai Khan, the Mongols were like the rock stars of the medieval world, and not the kind who trash hotel rooms. No, these guys were more into trashing entire empires. Kublai, with his strategic genius and iron resolve, was eyeing the Song lands like a buffet spread. He didn't see the Song dynasty as a formidable opponent. He saw it as a juicy opportunity. And unfortunately for the Song, he was right. Despite their technological advancements, gunpowder, anyone, the Song military was often outmaneuvered and outclassed on the battlefield. It's a classic case of having the tools, but not the talent. While the Song engineers could build weapons that made the average medieval knight wet his chainmail, their commanders couldn't seem to figure out how to use them effectively. It was as if they had a Ferrari, but couldn't find the ignition. The Mongol invasions were a masterclass in military strategy, with Kublai Khan exploiting every weakness the Song offered. The Song strategy, on the other hand, could be summarized as hoping for the best. They relied heavily on their fortified cities, thinking that their walls were impenetrable. Spoiler alert, they weren't. The Mongols were nothing if not adaptable, and they soon figured out how to breach these defenses with a lethal combination of siege warfare and psychological tactics. By 1279, the writing was on the wall, quite literally, as it turns out, since the Mongols had a fondness for psychological warfare that included spreading rumors and propaganda to demoralize their enemies. The final blow came at the Battle of Yemen, where the Song forces made their last stand. It was a naval battle that would have been epic if it wasn't so tragically lopsided. The Song were outnumbered and outgunned, and their defeat was swift and decisive. With the fall of Yemen, the Song dynasty effectively ceased to exist, absorbed into the sprawling Mongol empire. So, what went wrong? How did a dynasty that dazzled with its cultural and technological achievements end up in the dustbin of history? The answer lies in the delicate balance, or rather, imbalance, between innovation and administration. The Song dynasty was brimming with brilliant minds, but it lacked the hard-nosed leadership needed to harness that brilliance for survival. It's a tale as old as time. The allure of progress can sometimes blind even the wisest to the harsh realities of power. Yet, despite their ultimate downfall, the Song dynasty's legacy is far from tarnished. Their contributions to science, art, and culture were monumental, setting the stage for future generations. They were the pioneers who lit the path to modernity, even if they stumbled along the way. In many ways, the Song dynasty was like an ancient prototype of Silicon Valley, a hotbed of innovation, creativity, and yes, the occasional catastrophic failure. Their story is a testament to the enduring struggle between human aspiration and human folly. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a complex tapestry woven from the threads of ambition, error, and occasional brilliance. As we look back, we see a dynasty that dared to dream big, even if it sometimes tripped over its own dreams. So, as you drift off to sleep, ponder the lessons of the Song dynasty. Remember that innovation is only as strong as the foundation it rests upon, and that even the most glorious of empires can falter if they lose sight of the gritty realities that hold them together. The Song dynasty may have fallen, but its echoes continue to reverberate, a whisper from the past reminding us of the delicate dance between progress and preservation. In the grand tapestry of history, the Gupta Empire unfurls like a silk sari, dazzling, strategic, and with just a hint of mystery. Let's not kid ourselves. When you hear Golden Age of India, it might sound like a marketing slogan cooked up by a particularly enthusiastic tour guide. But there's a reason historians keep name-dropping the Guptas when they talk about peak ancient Indian civilization. So, let's dive in and meet the man who started it all. Chandragupta I, the dude who decided around 320 CE that he was going to shake things up and carve out an empire that still gets a standing ovation centuries later. Picture a map stretching from the Indus River basin in the west to the Bay of Bengal in the east. Yes, that's right. Chandragupta I didn't just wake up one day and find himself ruling over a few villages and some cows. He had vision, and more importantly, he had strategy. The Gupta Empire covered regions that today would span across multiple modern countries, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. It wasn't just a patchwork quilt of territories. It was a carefully curated collection of strategic locations, each contributing to the empire's might and prosperity. Now, let's talk about money, the true lifeblood of any empire. You see, the Guptas were no strangers to the art of commerce. They didn't just sit back and let wealth trickle in. They rolled up their sleeves and got their hands dirty in trade. Those Silk Road routes. Yeah, the Guptas had a piece of that action, connecting with distant lands like Rome and China. Imagine the bustling cities with bazaars full of silk, spices, and gems that sparkled like the eyes of a child promised dessert before dinner. Trade wasn't just an economic activity. It was the empire's backbone, a glittering spider's web of connections that spread Gupta influence far and wide. But let's not get too swept away by the glamour of trade and forget the social structure that kept this empire ticking. The Gupta dynasty wasn't exactly a democracy. You wouldn't vote for your local representative here. Instead, it was more of a know-your-place kind of society, with a caste system that made sure everyone knew where they stood, from the Brahmins at the top, whispering sacred chants, to the Shudras, who were probably too busy to notice the hierarchy while they worked away. It might seem harsh, but for the Guptas, it was a way to maintain order and stability in a sprawling empire. Chandragupta I himself was no ordinary ruler. He wasn't just sitting on a throne counting gold coins. He was a shrewd operator, understanding that marrying into the right family could be more powerful than any sword. His marriage to Kumaradvi of the Likhavi clan wasn't just a romantic tale, but a strategic alliance that brought with it territory and power. This union set the stage for his son, Samudragupta, to take the empire to new heights. But that's a saga for another day. The Guptas didn't just build an empire, they curated an experience. Their reign was a complex blend of military might, economic savvy, and social engineering. They were the original influencers, shaping a civilization that would echo through history. While the romance of a golden age is tempting, the reality was a mix of brilliant strategy and harsh societal norms. The Gupta Empire was a testament to what happens when ambition meets opportunity, and a little bit of luck doesn't hurt either. Now, while the Guptas were busy curating their empire like an Instagram feed full of golden filters and strategic alliances, they were also laying the groundwork for a scientific revolution that would make even the most skeptical Renaissance scholar nod in grudging respect. Enter Aryabhata, the man who made mathematics sexy long before anyone knew what calculus was. Born in 476 CE, Aryabhata was the kind of genius who could make the stars dance to his numbers, literally. He wasn't just scribbling equations. He was writing the future in the language of mathematics and astronomy. Let's talk about Zero, the unsung hero of mathematics. There's a myth floating around that the Gupta Empire invented zero during Aryabhata's time. While it's a lovely notion that the Guptas waved a magic wand and poof, created nothingness, the truth is a bit more nuanced. Aryabhata didn't invent zero. He inherited it from earlier mathematicians who were already toying with the concept of a placeholder. However, Aryabhata's work was pivotal in popularizing its use. And let's be honest, zero is the kind of invention that really gives your math homework personality. It's like the supporting actor in a blockbuster movie who quietly steals the show. Moving on from zero, Aryabhata had a fascination with circles, especially when it came to approximating pi. Man had a knack for numbers that would make any modern-day engineer shed a tear of joy. His approximation of pi was 3, 1416, which might not sound revolutionary until you realize this was over 1,000 years before calculus was a twinkle in Isaac Newton's eye. Aryabhata's work didn't just stop at pi. He also dabbled in what we now call trigonometry. Yep, while everyone else was busy building empires and fighting wars, Aryabhata was introducing the world to sine, cosine, and other trigonometric functions. It's like he was setting up the mathematical toolbox for future generations to build everything from skyscrapers to smartphone screens. Now, how did these mathematical musings translate into real-world applications? Well, for starters, Aryabhata's astronomical insights allowed for the prediction of solar and lunar eclipses with an accuracy that might have made neighboring rulers wonder if he had a direct line to the gods. Picture this, a gathering of scholars, eyes glued to the sky as Aryabhata's calculations unfold like a celestial magic trick. It wasn't just impressive, it was practical. Eclipses could be predicted, and let's face it, knowing when the sun or moon is going to disappear is a handy piece of information when you're trying to convince your subjects that you're on good terms with the universe. Aryabhata also proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis, which was a revolutionary idea at a time when many cultures believed the universe revolved around them, literally. It's as if Aryabhata was the original influencer, challenging the status quo with his cosmic insights and leaving the rest of the world scrambling to catch up. His work laid the foundation for future astronomers, ensuring that the Gupta Empire wasn't just a footnote in history, but a chapter that continues to inspire. But let's not get too starry-eyed about Aryabhata and his contemporaries. The Gupta Empire's scientific advancements weren't just the result of a few brilliant minds working in isolation. There was an entire ecosystem of scholars, texts, and cultural exchanges that facilitated this golden age of discovery. The Guptas had the foresight to support education and the arts, creating an environment where knowledge could flourish. It was a bit like a modern-day tech hub, where innovation was the currency of progress. This scientific fervor was also reflected in medicine, where Ayurvedic texts like the Charaka Samhita and the Sushruta Samhita were being compiled and refined. These texts didn't just prescribe herbs and spices. They offered insights into surgery, anatomy, and disease prevention that were ahead of their time. It's a reminder that the Gupta Empire was a complex tapestry where science and culture were tightly interwoven, each thread adding depth to a civilization that was as much about ideas as it was about power. So, while the Guptas were busy impressing the world with their military might and economic prowess, they were also quietly revolutionizing how we understand the universe and our place in it. Aryabhata and his fellow scholars might not have had Instagram to document their achievements, but their legacy is etched in the annals of history, a testament to what can happen when curiosity meets opportunity. And as we delve deeper into the Gupta Empire's golden age, remember that behind every myth is a reality that's just as fascinating, if not more so. Speaking of legacies etched in history, let's shift gears to another domain where the Gupta Empire was knocking it out of the park: literature and the arts. You might say that if Aryabhata was the Neil deGrasse Tyson of his day, then Kalidasa was the empire's Shakespeare. This guy was the master wordsmith of the Gupta period, weaving tales and poetry that made even the most stoic Brahmin shed a tear. Born somewhere between the 4th and 5th century CE, Kalidasa was the kind of poet who could turn a grocery list into a soulful sonnet. Now, before we get too swept up in the romantic allure of Gupta literature, let's get down to brass tacks. Sanskrit was the language of choice. Think of it as the Latin of ancient India. It was the lingua franca for scholars, poets, and priests, and Kalidasa wielded it like a maestro conducting an orchestra. His magnum opus, Shakuntala, is a drama that still holds a candle to today's tearjerkers, and his works like Meghajuta, the Cloud Messenger, were not just poetic fluff, but reflections of Gupta society's values and aesthetics. Kalidasa's writing wasn't merely about spinning a good yarn. It was a commentary on the empire's cultural zenith, a reflection of its philosophical depth and artistic flair. But let's not pretend that all of Gupta literature was rainbows and butterflies. While Kalidasa was painting literary masterpieces, the empire itself was also busy painting a very different kind of picture, one of power and authority. Cue the art of coinage. The Guptas, ever the pragmatists, knew that the best way to remind everyone who was running the show was to literally stamp their mark on the economy. Each coin was like a miniature billboard, emblazoned with the ruler's face, a bit of propaganda you could jingle in your pocket. These coins weren't just currency. They were a daily reminder of who was boss, a small but potent piece of political art. Moving from coins to stone, let's delve into temple architecture, where the Guptas really flexed their artistic muscles. Forget the romantic notion of temples as mere places of worship. These structures were also the empire's way of flexing its cultural and political might. The Gupta temples were architectural marvels that not only served religious purposes, but also acted as symbols of state power. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of skyscrapers, a testament to the empire's wealth and stability. Take the Dashavatara temple in Diagar, for example. Built around the early 6th century CE, this temple is an embodiment of Gupta architectural innovation. Its intricate carvings and detailed reliefs depict scenes from Hindu mythology, but there's more to it than meets the eye. These artistic elements were also a form of soft power, reinforcing the legitimacy of the rulers who commissioned them. Every chiseled deity and stone-carved narrative was a not-so-subtle nod to the divine right of kings, a silent yet eloquent assertion of the Gupta's place not just on earth, but in the cosmic order. And speaking of cosmic orders, let's not forget that art and religion in the Gupta era were intricately intertwined. The temples were designed to lead one on a spiritual journey, an experience that was as much about politics as it was about piety. The placement of shrines and the orientation of temples, they weren't random. Each architectural decision contributed to a narrative of power and divine favor. It was a grand, stone-carved PR campaign that would make even modern spin doctors weep with envy. But before we get too misty-eyed about the artistic achievements of the Gupta Empire, let's inject a dose of reality. The notion that Gupta art was a purely romantic endeavor, driven by an ethereal pursuit of beauty, is as realistic as a barleywood plot. The truth is, much of the art and architecture was about as practical as it was pretty. Those breathtaking sculptures and intricate temple designs, they were also employment schemes, keeping thousands of artisans and craftsmen gainfully occupied. It was an economic strategy wrapped in an artistic package. In the vibrant tapestry of Gupta culture, temple architecture wasn't just about aesthetics or spiritual fulfillment. It was a strategic maneuver, a blend of artistry and politics. The Guptas understood that art could be a tool of statecraft, a way to unify diverse populations under a single cultural and religious umbrella. It was about creating a shared identity, a narrative that resonated across the empire's sprawling territories. Now, as we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Gupta cultural achievements, remember, behind every romanticized myth of a golden age lies a complex reality of politics, economics, and power struggles. The Gupta Empire, with its shimmering facade of artistic brilliance and cultural renaissance, was also a well-oiled machine of strategic governance and economic savvy. Its legacy, like its art, was a careful blend of beauty and pragmatism, a reminder that even in the most dazzling of golden ages, there's always more than meets the eye. So, as we continue our journey through the annals of Gupta history, keep your eyes peeled for the intricate dance of art and power, where every brushstroke and chisel mark tells a story of ambition, influence, and the enduring quest for legacy. The tale of the Gupta Empire is far from over, and as we delve deeper, the layers of history promise to reveal even more fascinating insights into a civilization that was as much about strategy as it was about splendor. So, while we've been busy admiring the Gupta Empire's dazzling cultural achievements, let's not forget that they also had to keep the lights on and the empire running smoothly. And no, they didn't have the luxury of Slack channels or Zoom meetings to manage their sprawling territories. Instead, they had something far more effective, a mix of sharp political acumen and an administrative system that was as nuanced as a modern tax code. Imagine trying to govern an empire that stretched across the Indian subcontinent without the aid of Google Maps. The Guptas managed it with a system that was part bureaucracy, part genius. The empire was divided into provinces, each overseen by a governor who reported back to the central government. These governors were like the regional managers in a chain store, ensuring everything from tax collection to law enforcement ran smoothly. The Gupta administration had layers of officials, from district officers to village headmen, each tasked with keeping the local gears turning. It was a bit like a well-oiled machine, except with more parchment and fewer spreadsheets. Now, while the administrative system was crucial, let's not kid ourselves into thinking the Gupta Empire was all sunshine and smooth governance. Contrary to the myth of a peaceful golden age, the Guptas were no strangers to conflict. The empire's borders were constantly tested by regional skirmishes and internal rebellions. Think of it as a game of whack-a-mole, with local chieftains and petty kings popping up to challenge Gupta authority. The empire maintained a standing army, with soldiers ready to march at a moment's notice to quell any unrest. War elephants, cavalry, and foot soldiers formed the backbone of their military force. Picture 1,000 war elephants thundering across a battlefield, each a tank in its own right, trumpeting the empire's might. But here's the kicker. Despite their military prowess, the Gupta Empire wasn't immune to decline. The arrival of the Huns in the 5th century CE was like an uninvited guest crashing a party. These nomadic warriors from Central Asia weren't there to admire the architecture or indulge in the local cuisine. They were there to conquer, and conquer they did. The Huns, led by their fearsome leader Toramana, began their incursions into Gupta territory around 455 CE. It was the beginning of the end for the empire, as these invasions strained resources and destabilized the region. The once mighty Gupta Empire found itself on the back foot, its territories shrinking like a deflated balloon. Adding to the empire's woes was its intricate administrative system, which, while effective in its heyday, became a liability in times of crisis. With so many layers of bureaucracy, decision-making could be as sluggish as a dial-up internet connection. The empire's ability to respond swiftly to threats was hampered by the very system that had once been its strength. It's a classic case of bureaucracy gone wild, where the red tape becomes a straitjacket instead of a safety net. And then there was the economic context, the silent partner in any empire's success or failure. The Gupta economy was heavily reliant on agriculture and trade. When invasions disrupted trade routes and agricultural production, it was like pulling the rug out from under the empire's feet. Tax revenues plummeted, and with them, the funds necessary to maintain the military and administrative apparatus. The economic engine that had powered the Gupta's golden age began to sputter, leaving the empire vulnerable to internal strife and external threats. But before we paint too bleak a picture, let's not forget the resilience of human nature. Even amidst decline, there were pockets of resistance and innovation. Local leaders in outlying regions began to assert more autonomy, creating mini-kingdoms that would eventually evolve into the regional powers of medieval India. It's a testament to the enduring spirit of these people, who took the chaos of empire's collapse and fashioned new political identities from the debris. In the end, the story of the Gupta Empire is a reminder that even the most glorious of golden ages can have a tarnished underside. Behind the shimmering facade of cultural and scientific achievements lay a complex tapestry of politics, economics, and military challenges. The Guptas were masters of their time, but they were also human, subject to the whims of fate and the relentless march of history. As we continue to unravel their tale, remember that the myths of peace and prosperity are often just that, myths. The reality is always a bit more complicated, a bit more human, and infinitely more fascinating. While the myth of the Gupta Empire glows with the allure of a golden age, the reality is a bit more nuanced. It's like peeling an onion. Layer by layer reveals the sting of unshed tears. Despite the romanticized image of peace and prosperity, let's not forget the social inequalities that were cemented into its very foundation. The caste system, for instance, was more than a social hierarchy. It was a rigid framework that dictated every aspect of life. So, while the elite were busy penning epic poetry and calculating the circumference of the earth, the lower castes were, well, keeping the whole show running like unsung stager hands. Fast forward to modern times, and the echoes of this social stratification can still be heard. It's a bit like discovering your favorite band is a one-hit wonder. Sure, the song's catchy, but the rest of the album, not so much. The Gupta Empire's legacy in social structure is a reminder that while civilizations can achieve great things, they can also leave behind a trail of issues that resonate through the centuries. Even today, the remnants of caste-based inequalities persist in various forms across South Asia, a testament to the enduring impact of the Gupta's societal blueprint. Now, let's pivot to another juicy tidbit that history often glosses over: the political fragility of the Gupta Empire. The notion of an unassailable empire is as realistic as a Hollywood action hero who never runs out of bullets. Despite their sophisticated administrative apparatus, the Guptas faced constant challenges to their authority. Regional governors, those supposed pillars of Gupta governance, sometimes had ambitions of their own. It's as if the empire was a giant game of musical chairs, with power players constantly jockeying for position, hoping to grab a seat or a throne before the music stopped. This political fragility is a lesson in the pitfalls of centralized power. When authority is concentrated at the top, it creates a hierarchy that's ripe for upheaval whenever the winds of fortune shift. A valuable lesson for today's world, where political systems are often teetering on the edge of stability, not unlike a Jenga tower with a few too many pieces pulled out. But hey, it wasn't all doom and gloom. The Gupta Empire's cultural and scientific contributions were nothing short of revolutionary, and they laid the groundwork for future advancements. Their literature, mathematics, and art didn't just vanish with the empire's decline. They seeped into the cultural bedrock of the region and beyond. Aryabhata's astronomical insights set the stage for future scientists, while Kalidasa's works continued to inspire poets and playwrights for generations. It's like the Guptas were the opening act for a world tour that would last well beyond their final curtain call. And so, we arrive at the crux of the matter. Why should we care about the Gupta Empire today? Well, for starters, their story is a microcosm of the human experience, filled with ambition, triumph, and yes, a fair share of blunders. It's a reminder that civilizations, much like people, are complex creatures. They can reach dizzying heights of achievement while simultaneously grappling with internal demons. The Guptas were not just architects of a golden age. They were also human beings navigating the messy, unpredictable waters of history. Their tale offers a mirror to our own time, reflecting the cyclical nature of history. Just as the Gupta Empire rose and fell, so too do modern societies grapple with similar challenges. Whether it's managing economic disparities, balancing political power, or fostering scientific and cultural growth, the lessons of the Guptas remain strikingly relevant. History has this funny way of repeating itself, often with a sense of irony that can only be appreciated with hindsight. So, as you tuck yourself in tonight, pondering the vast tapestry of history, remember the Guptas not as relics of a bygone era, but as harbingers of the complexities we continue to face today. They remind us that the stories we tell, of golden ages and epic empires, are never as simple as they seem. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy of all, a testament to the enduring dance between myth and reality, a dance that continues to unfold with each passing day. Roman feasts were not just about the food. Sure, they had more courses than a modern tasting menu, but the real allure was the theatrical display of power and social gymnastics. Before you could even think about the menu, you had to understand where you'd be eating it. Enter the triclinium, the Roman dining room, which was less of a cozy nook and more of a social battleground. Picture this, a room with 3 couches arranged in a U-shape. Now, these weren't your grandma's couches. We're talking about stone platforms, sometimes with cushions if you were lucky enough to dine with someone who didn't skimp on comfort. The name triclinium itself comes from the Greek tri for 3 and klein for couch. Each couch could fit 3 diners, which, by Roman standards, was the perfect number for a casual dinner party of 9. But let's not kid ourselves. Casual in ancient Rome meant you had to navigate a minefield of etiquette and hierarchy before you even got to the hors d'oeuvres. The triclinium wasn't just a place to eat. It was a stage where every social cue was magnified. Your position around that U-shaped setup was like a live-action Facebook status. Everyone knew what it meant. The host, like the sun god Helios, shone from the middle couch. This prime spot was reserved for the evening's VIPs. If you were invited to lounge there, congratulations, you were on the Roman A-list. But if you found yourself on the far couch, well, you were probably the ancient equivalent of a +1. Still, better to be there than not invited at all. Now, let's talk invitations. In today's terms, getting invited to a Roman feast was like receiving a golden ticket to the Met Gala, but with more togas and fewer selfies. The guest list was a carefully curated blend of political allies, social climbers, and genuine friends, though in Rome, those categories had a lot of overlap. A Roman host was like a political strategist, using his dinners to cement alliances, pay back debts, and subtly let people know where they stood. Invitations were not sent out willy-nilly. They were strategic chess moves in the grand game of Roman politics. One of the most famous hosts, Lucullus, was known for his extravagant feasts, which were as much about flaunting his wealth as they were about entertaining. His dining rooms were so famous that the phrase Lucullan feast became synonymous with opulence. Lucullus didn't just invite people over for dinner. He put on a spectacle that made sure his guests knew they were part of something exclusive. Think of it as the ancient version of having your name on the guest list at an exclusive club, except this club served dishes like flamingo tongues and roasted dormice. But let's not get too carried away with the glamour. The reality was that these feasts were a complex web of social norms, where a misstep could lead to public embarrassment, or worse, political ruin. If you thought modern seating charts were tricky, try balancing the egos of senators, generals, and poets, all vying for the host's favor. Seating arrangements were a delicate dance, where the wrong placement could signal a demotion in social status. And woe to the host who failed to acknowledge someone's newfound wealth or political standing by giving them a seat of honor. The invitation process was equally fraught with nuance. A written invitation might be a rarity, as most were delivered verbally by a slave or messenger. The tone of the invitation could make all the difference. Did the host sound eager, obliged? Was there a hint of desperation? All these were scrutinized as carefully as any modern text message. The stakes were high, and the social consequences could be harsh. And let's not ignore the uninvited guests, those brave souls who attempted to crash these exclusive gatherings. Known as umbri, or shadows, these party crashers ranged from hopeful social climbers to disgraced former friends looking to regain favor. The Romans had a term for everything, and if you were caught uninvited at a feast, you could be publicly shamed or physically removed. Not quite the end of a night anyone would want. In conclusion, a Roman feast was more than just a meal. It was a microcosm of Roman society, a place where power dynamics, alliances, and social hierarchies were as much on the menu as the food itself. The triclinium was an architectural marvel, a social litmus test, and a stage for political theater. So the next time you're arranging a dinner party and stressing over the seating chart, take comfort in knowing that at least your guests aren't deciding your political future or plotting your downfall over the soup course. Or maybe they are. After all, some things never change. Let's dive fork first into the Roman feast menu, shall we? Because if you thought the seating arrangements were a minefield, wait until you hear about the culinary concoctions that graced the tables. Roman chefs were the original mad scientists, and their kitchens were laboratories of excess and exoticism. The star of the show, stuffed dormice. That's right, these little critters were like the Roman equivalent of a gourmet slider. Stuffed with finely chopped pork or other meats, seasoned with a blend of herbs and spices, and then roasted to crispy perfection. A delicacy that would make your modern appetizer look like a sad carrot stick at a toddler's birthday party. But dormice were just the tip of the iceberg. Garum, the infamous fish sauce, was the secret ingredient in just about everything. Imagine the Romans pouring this pungent elixir over dishes like it was the sriracha of its day. Made by fermenting fish, typically mackerel, in the sun for months, garum was the umami balm no Roman feast could do without. The sauce was so popular that it became a booming industry, with production hubs like Pompeii churning out amphorae by the thousands. And it wasn't cheap. Top-quality garum could cost as much as a bottle of fine wine today. Speaking of wine, it flowed like water at these feasts. Romans had a penchant for mixing their vino with a variety of ingredients, from honey to seawater, creating cocktails that would make a modern mixologist blush. Wine was a social lubricant, a sign of wealth, and a diplomatic tool all rolled into one. But if you were thinking everyone could indulge, think again. The quality and origin of your wine were status symbols. Aged Falanian from the slopes of Mount Falanus was the Dame Pérignon of its day, reserved for those who wanted to flaunt their taste and treasury. Now, to source these luxurious ingredients, Romans didn't just pop down to the local market. Their culinary reach extended across the empire and beyond. Spices from India, olives from Hispania, and dates from Egypt turned their tables into a global tasting tour. These ingredients weren't just about flavor, they were power on a plate. The ability to serve exotic dishes was a flex, a demonstration of the host's connections, wealth, and influence. It was evidence that they were a player in the grand game of Roman politics. After all, who wouldn't want to be known as the guy who could get his hands on peppercorns when most Romans had never even heard of them? So, what did it cost to pull off such a feast? Luculus, our go-to guy for opulence, reportedly spent the equivalent of millions of today's dollars on a single feast. But even the less extravagant hosts shelled out serious cash. Hosting a feast was like buying a luxury car. It was an investment in your social standing. Of course, this kind of spending could be risky. Throwing a feast that didn't live up to the hype could damage your reputation faster than a bad Yelp review. And if your guests left unimpressed, you might as well kiss your political ambitions goodbye. The stakes were high, but the rewards were higher. A successful feast could cement alliances, attract powerful friends, and elevate your status in the cutthroat world of Roman society. In a culture where who you dined with was as important as what you dined on, these meals were the ultimate social currency. And like any currency, they were subject to fluctuation. One day you're the toast of the town, the next you're the host who served stale garum. In the end, Roman feasts were more than just a chance to indulge in culinary excess. They were carefully orchestrated performances, where every dish, every ingredient, and every guest played a role in the host's grand narrative. They were a testament to the lengths humans will go to impress, connect, and one-up each other. So the next time you're stressing about your dinner party menu, remember the Romans and their stuffed dormice. At least you're not trying to source flamingo tongues. Yet, while you're not hunting down flamingo tongues for your next dinner party, the Romans were busy perfecting the art of entertainment at their feasts, ensuring that no guest would even consider sneaking out early. Now, forget your idea of background music or small talk over cocktails. We're talking about spectacles that would make a Vegas show look like community theater. When it came to entertainment, the Romans had a flair for the dramatic. Picture poets reciting verses with the kind of gravitas that could make Shakespeare seem as lively as a grocery list. These literary performances weren't just about flexing one's intellectual muscles. They were also a subtle way to remind guests of the host's cultured tastes. And by subtle, I mean hitting them over the head with a sonnet. And let's not forget the musicians, whose lyres and flutes set the evening's tone. Forget Spotify playlists. These musicians were the living, breathing iTunes of the day, and their presence was as much a status symbol as the wine being poured. Speaking of wine, it was the social glue holding these soirees together. Romans had an almost spiritual relationship with the stuff, using it to oil the gears of conversation, and more importantly, to measure one's social standing. You see, wine wasn't just fermented grape juice, it was a political tool. It came in different grades, and serving the right vintage could elevate a host in the eyes of their guests. Offer your elite friends a cup of something less than stellar, and you might as well have served them a bucket of malt water. But the true piece de resistance of a Roman feast was the more macabre entertainment options. Enter the gladiatorial displays. Yes, you heard it right, gladiators at dinner. If you thought modern dinner theater was intense, try digesting your stuffed dormouse while watching a fight to the death. These spectacles mirrored the values Romans held dear: strength, bravery, and a touch of brutality. It was all about showing off power, both the hosts and the empires. Gladiators were the rock stars of their time, and the bloodier the show, the more memorable the feast. Now, you might wonder why such extreme forms of entertainment were necessary. The answer lies in the very fabric of Roman society, where appearances were everything. A lackluster party could spell disaster for a host's reputation. The stakes weren't just high, they were sky high, like a political game of Jenga, where one wrong move could bring the whole tower crashing down. The more sensational the entertainment, the more firmly the host cemented their place in the social hierarchy. So, while it might sound barbaric to us, in Rome, it was just good hosting. Of course, these spectacles weren't just for show. They also served as a handy distraction. When your political alliances were as fragile as a soufflé, a well-timed gladiator fight could shift attention away from a potential faux pas or awkward conversation. Think of it as the ancient Roman version of changing the subject with a particularly juicy bit of gossip. And don't even get me started on the cost of all this entertainment. Hiring a gladiator for an evening could set you back more than a year's salary for a common Roman laborer. But in a world where social currency was as real as the coinage in one's purse, the investment was worth every sesterce. It was all about maintaining face, keeping alliances strong, and ensuring no one left your feast without remembering just how spectacular it was. So, what does all this say about Roman societal values? It paints a picture of a culture where power and prestige were everything. Entertainment was an extension of the feast itself, a way to demonstrate control over both people and perceptions. It was a world where a meal wasn't just about sustenance, but an elaborate dance of alliances and social climbing. In the end, whether it was poetry or pugilism, the entertainment at Roman feasts was a microcosm of the empire itself, a blend of art, politics, and yes, a dash of the brutal. It was a place where one's position could rise or fall as easily as a gladiator's sword. And while we might look back with a mix of horror and fascination, there's no denying the Romans knew how to throw a party that left a lasting impression. As we sip our modern wines and ponder the complexities of Roman entertainment, it's clear that a feast was more than just a meal. It was an elaborate performance, a testament to the host's power and influence. And while the menu may have changed, the essence of using gatherings to forge connections and demonstrate status remains timeless. But hold onto your goblets, because we're not done yet. The Roman feast has more secrets to unfold, more stories to tell, and more lessons to impart in our next exploration. Stay tuned. Roman feasts, where the entertainment dazzled and the food was a spectacle, but what about the aftermath? Let's peel back the gilded curtain of the triclinium and dive into the less glamorous, yet utterly fascinating, world of Roman hygiene. No point in sugarcoating it. When you're hosting a feast with enough food to feed a small legion, waste management becomes a pressing concern. First, let's tackle the elephant in the room, or rather, the dormouse under the table. The myth of Romans tossing bones and scraps onto the floor like they were auditioning for a reality show in chaos is one that needs a good debunking. Sure, there were no Dyson vacuums or Roombas, but the Romans weren't complete barbarians. They had slaves. Yes, the invisible workforce of the Roman feast, whose job it was to keep things tidy. Picture them as the unsung heroes of hygiene, whisking away bones and napkins with a speed and stealth that would make any modern waiter proud. Now, speaking of waste, let's talk about the Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. Built in the 6th century BCE, this engineering marvel was a testament to Roman ingenuity. It wasn't just a glorified ditch. It was a sophisticated network of tunnels designed to whisk away the city's waste, proving that even in ancient times, out of sight was decidedly out of mind. A clean triclinium was, after all, the sign of a host who had their act together. Think of it as their version of a spotless guest bathroom. And what about personal hygiene, you ask? Well, the idea that Romans were perpetually filthy is about as accurate as saying they all wore togas 24/7. The public baths, or thermae, were the spas of their day, offering the perfect blend of cleanliness and social networking. For a few sesterces, a Roman could steam, scrape, and soak away any lingering aromas from last night's feast. And trust me, after a dinner where garum was the star ingredient, a good soak was probably mandatory. But let's not forget the table manners. The image of Romans lying down to eat might conjure visions of decadence, but it was also a practical choice. Reclining on couches, diners could converse freely and enjoy their meals more leisurely, a far cry from the straight-backed dining chairs we're used to. It was all about comfort and conversation, a sort of ancient version of networking over brunch. But make no mistake, the social etiquette was as intricate as the food. You didn't just grab a drumstick and gnaw away like a barbarian. There was a refined art to consuming your flamingo tongue without ending up on the floor. Now, onto the role of slaves. These individuals were the gears that kept the Roman feast machine running smoothly. From preparing the elaborate dishes to serving them with precision, slaves were indispensable, yet often invisible to the elite who depended on them. The reality is stark. While guests were busy deciding whether to have a second helping of roast boar, slaves were managing a dance of logistics that rivaled any modern kitchen brigade. They were the DJs of the dinner party, mixing and serving the perfect balance of food, drink, and service. Slaves were also the silent arbiters of the guest list, often tasked with delivering invitations, and awkwardly, perhaps, uninviting certain individuals when social dynamics shifted. Imagine being the messenger charged with telling a senator he's been demoted to +1 status. Talk about a high-stakes job. Economically, slaves were a significant investment, and their roles at feasts underscored the wealth and status of their owners. It was a brutal reality that the brilliance of a Roman feast was built on the backs of those who had no choice but to serve. In a society where power was everything, the ability to command a small army of servants was the ultimate status symbol, a testament to one's place in the social hierarchy. So, while the image of a Roman feast might sparkle with opulence and indulgence, the truth is it was a complex tapestry woven with threads of practicality, engineering marvels and social dynamics. Yes, there were flamingo tongues and gladiators, but there were also slaves and sewers, working tirelessly behind the scenes to keep the illusion intact. Just remember, the next time your dinner party hits a snag, at least you're not dealing with the aftermath of a feast attended by 30 toga-clad guests and a questionable amount of fermented fish sauce. Stay tuned, because the Roman feast isn't finished unveiling its secrets. There's more to discuss, more layers to peel back, and more myths to bust in our next chapter. Speaking of secretive layers and hidden truths, let's dig into the political circus that was the Roman feast. The triclinium wasn't just a dining room. It was a mini Colosseum of political maneuvering. In a society where power was more slippery than a greased pig, every bite of dormouse could come with a side of diplomatic tension. Imagine rubbing elbows with a senator whose alliance you're trying to secure, while also making sure the general on your left doesn't feel slighted. It was politics with a side of peacock tongue, and it was as dangerous as it was delicious. Feasts were the original networking events, where the guest list was curated like a Spotify playlist at a hipster coffee shop. You wanted the right balance of political heavyweights, social climbers, and a sprinkle of intellectuals to keep the conversation spicy. Hosting a feast was a bit like running a campaign rally, but instead of bumper stickers, you were handing out cuts of roast boar. The stakes were high, and a successful feast could launch a political career faster than you could say, Veni, Vidi, Vici. Consider Julius Caesar himself, who famously used banquets to win the hearts and votes of the Roman populace. He didn't just serve food, he served a vision of Rome that was grander, more inclusive, and yes, more indulgent. A Caesar-sized feast wasn't just a meal, it was a manifesto. It's no wonder that when he crossed the Rubicon, he had legions of supporters who'd been wined and dined into loyalty. But let's not glaze over the grit in this glossy picture. For every luculent feast that dazzled, there were countless gatherings where the host's ambitions came crashing down like a bad soufflé. Imagine, if you will, a Roman senator with dreams of grandeur, investing his entire fortune on a feast that was supposed to secure his political future. The wine flowed, the garum was pungent, but the evening fell flat. Perhaps a poet fumbled his lines, or the gladiators weren't as thrilling as the hype. Instead of leaving with allegiances, guests left with nothing more than indigestion. In a society where one misstep could lead to ruin, a failed feast was the equivalent of a public relations disaster, tweeted far and wide via gossip rather than hashtags. And what of the cultural exchange? Roman feasts were melting pots of ideas, where philosophers could debate the latest theories, and artists could unveil their newest works. It was like a TED talk over a 3-course meal, but with more wine and less PowerPoint. These gatherings were cultural incubators, places where new ideas could ferment alongside the wine. The cross-pollination of cultures within the Roman Empire meant that a feast wasn't just a meal, but a showcase of the empire's diversity. A dish might feature spices from India, grains from Gaul, and seafood from Egypt, a culinary map of Rome's vast reach. Yet, let's strip away the romantic veneer and peer into the grit beneath. The flip side of this cultural exchange was the stark reality of inequality. While the elite dined on delicacies, the majority were more likely to be gnawing on barley bread and olives if they were lucky. The feasts were a microcosm of Roman society, highlighting the chasm between the haves and the have-nots with every course served. Opulence for some, subsistence for others, a tale as old as time, told through the medium of food. So, where does this leave us as we wrap up our culinary journey through ancient Rome? It's tempting to romanticize the feasts as glittering soirees of power and culture, but the truth is far more nuanced. These gatherings were arenas where the clashing of egos was as palpable as the clashing of swords in the amphitheater. They were platforms for political theater, where the host's fortunes could rise or fall as swiftly as a gladiator's blade. In the end, Roman feasts were a testament to human nature, a blend of ambition, artistry, and avarice. They remind us that while the specifics of power dynamics may change, the fundamental drive to influence and impress remains timeless. So next time you host a dinner party and you're sweating the seating chart or wondering if you've prepared enough hors d'oeuvres, just think of the Romans. At least your guests aren't deciding your political future over the cheese plate, or are they? As we close the curtain on the Roman feast, we're left with a tableau that's both dazzling and dizzying. It was a world where a host could orchestrate their own rise, or their own downfall, through the art of the feast. A world where the lines between dinner and diplomacy blurred, and every dish could carry the weight of an empire. And while we may not be serving flamingo tongues, or hosting gladiatorial battles anytime soon, the echoes of those ancient feasts still resonate today. So, here's to history's greatest hosts and their enduring legacy. May your own gatherings be opulent, your alliances strong, and your guests always leave wanting more. You wake up on a typical morning in a first-century Roman villa, greeted not by the annoying buzz of an alarm clock, but by the gentle chorus of household slaves shuffling through their morning chores. The air is infused with the earthy aroma of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, a sweet reminder that even in ancient times, carbs were comfort food. As you stretch, you can hear the distant clatter of parts and the soft murmur of Latin phrases that might as well be Roman, for where did I put that amphora? Your day begins in the atrium, the heart of the villa, and the Roman equivalent of the modern-day living room, or maybe more like a combination of an Instagram-worthy foyer and a display case for family bragging rights. This space isn't just about aesthetics, though. It's an architectural marvel designed to impress guests and reflect your social status. Think of it as a first-century version of posting a photo of your living room on social media, but with more columns and fewer likes. Speaking of columns, they're everywhere, like the Corinthian ones in the atrium, which are all about showing off wealth and taste. The atrium's centerpiece is the impluvium, a sunken basin that collects rainwater from the compluvium, an opening in the roof. It's part practical plumbing solution, part decorative statement. If you were a Roman bigwig, you'd probably want guests to see it and think, wow, this guy's got his water game sorted. The villa itself is a sprawling complex, a bit like if someone combined a mansion with a cozy family home, then sprinkled in some ancient Roman flair. These villas weren't just homes, they were economic powerhouses. Owning one was a sign of wealth and prestige, akin to having a second home in the Hamptons today. The construction cost alone could be astronomical. Think thousands of denarii, the Roman currency that might remind you of Bitcoin in its ability to confuse anyone not paying close attention. Maintenance wasn't cheap, either. Keeping a villa running smoothly required constant attention and a small army of slaves and workers, much like today's staff needed to manage a mansion. As you wander farther into the villa, you reach the peristyle, a colonnaded garden where the family would escape the hustle and bustle of Roman life. Here, you can find an odd mix of tranquility and status symbols. It's where your family might stroll, philosophize, or just enjoy the quiet, a sort of ancient Mediterranean Zen garden with a side of social climbing. The garden isn't just for show, it's a practical space as well, where herbs and vegetables are grown, ensuring that your household's meals have that farm-to-table freshness long before it became a hipster trend. Next, you head towards the triclinium, the dining room, where most of the household's socializing happens. The name itself comes from tri, meaning three, and cline, meaning couch, because who doesn't love a good recline while they dine? Meals here are an event, not just a necessity. During a dinner party, you'd lounge on one of those couches, propped up on your left elbow, while your right hand is free to partake in the feast. It's not just about food, it's about politics, business deals, and showing off your latest imported wine or exotic spices. But let's not romanticize it too much. The triclinium, for all its glamour, is also a place where social hierarchies are as rigid as the Roman roads. Your position at the table says a lot about your status. sit too far from the host, and you might as well be relegated to the kiddie table. Plus, the whole reclining thing sounds luxurious until you realize it's a bit like eating Thanksgiving dinner from your couch, which can be more uncomfortable than elegant. Owning a villa is a serious commitment. The economic implications are staggering. It's not just about the initial outlay. It's a constant stream of expenses for maintenance, staff, and the inevitable Roman version of property taxes. In fact, owning one of these beauties means you're deeply entrenched in the local economy, employing artisans, laborers, and even a small army of slaves to keep everything running smoothly. You'd think with all this grandeur, life in a Roman villa would be all olives and sunshine, but the reality is far more nuanced. Sure, there's the allure of luxury, but it's also a never-ending cycle of upkeep and social maneuvering. The villa is as much a symbol of power and responsibility as it is of wealth, much like today's high-powered executives who are always a phone call away from the next big deal. As the sun climbs higher, the villa buzzes with activity, each member of the household slipping into their routine roles. It's a well-oiled machine, with each cog turning in harmony to keep the family's status afloat. While it all seems grand, remember that beneath the marble veneer, life for the Roman elite is just as layered and complex as any episode of a modern-day drama series. And just like any setting worth its salt, this villa has its secrets, its pressures, and its endless demands. As you navigate this day in the life, keep an eye out. There's always more beneath the surface when you're living large in ancient Rome. As you move deeper into the villa's daily rhythm, let's start with the morning rituals of the Roman elite, a set of traditions that would make any modern skincare influencer proud. Rise and shine. It's time to grab your olive oil and strigil. Forget soap and water. Here, it's all about slathering yourself with olive oil and then scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. Think of it as a warm-up for the day, peeling away yesterday's grime and sweat, leaving you with a glow that would rival any Mediterranean sunset. This grooming routine isn't just about looking good, though appearances were as crucial then as they are now, but also about health. Romans believed the oil's properties helped ward off diseases, a kind of ancient SPF. It's a far cry from today's myriad of lotions and potions, but hey, it worked for them. And if you were wealthy enough, you'd have a slave or two helping you with this ritual, ensuring not a drop of oil was wasted. The strigil was the only thing between you and a lifetime of clogged pores, after all. Speaking of slaves, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the ox, in the room. While the allure of a well-oiled Roman morning might sound like a wellness retreat, the reality was that such luxury was built on the backs of slaves. The happy slave narrative is a myth as persistent as the idea that gladiators were all about noble combat. The truth is, the lives of slaves were harsh, filled with grueling labor, and little in the way of personal agency. They were the human machinery that kept the villa running smoothly. You might picture a household slave as a smiling figure, happily serving breakfast, but reality check. Their lives were anything but idyllic. We know from ancient texts like those of Seneca that slaves endured harsh conditions, with punishments meted out for the smallest infractions. Seneca once wrote, "We are all slaves of fate." But unlike the philosophical musings of the elite, slaves had no such luxury of choice or freedom. Now, back to breakfast. Forget the sugary cereals or avocado toast of today. The Romans kicked off their day with a simple meal known as the intaculum. Bread was a staple, sometimes dipped in wine, if you were feeling luxurious. If you were really living the high life, you might enjoy honey, olives, or cheese. It was a meal of necessity, not indulgence, designed to fuel the day rather than delight the palate. The morning spread was more survival kit than culinary delight. In this bustling environment, slaves played crucial roles. They were the invisible hands that kneaded the bread, tended the fires, and served the masters, all before their own day truly began. Their tasks were as varied as they were vital, from cooking to cleaning to handling the villa's financial accounts. And let's not forget the pedagogues, those educated slaves tasked with tutoring the children of the household. Imagine having an unpaid, full-time tutor whose entire life revolved around ensuring the future leaders of Rome could pass their Virgil and Cicero. Despite the romanticized notion of the noble Roman villa, life for the enslaved was anything but romantic. The Roman legal system didn't help either. Under Roman law, slaves were regarded as property, not people. the jurist Gaius summed it up, stating, "Slaves are in the power of their masters." This wasn't just idle talk. Owners wielded the power of life and death over their slaves, a grim reality that underscores the villa's apparent opulence. Yet, here's the kicker. Some Romans genuinely believed their slaves were content. This cognitive dissonance was fueled by a society that depended on slavery for its economic engine. The idea that slaves might be happy was a comforting lie that allowed the elite to enjoy their privileges without too much moral discomfort, much like the way some people today conveniently overlook the human cost behind their gadgets. But let's rewind a bit. How did these villas come to be such powerhouses of economic and social activity? Well, the answer lies in the Roman knack for organization and hierarchy. Each villa was a microcosm of the broader Roman world, complete with its own internal hierarchy and economy. The villa was not just home, but a business. Agricultural output, usually wine or olives, was the name of the game, and slaves were the workforce that made it all possible. This wasn't just about sustenance. It was about profit, status, and influence. The villa's economic importance can't be overstated. With the Roman Empire's expansion, land ownership became synonymous with power. Owning a villa meant you were a player in the local and even national economy, a status symbol that shouted, "I've made it." But beneath the surface, it was a complex operation, needing meticulous planning and harsh labor to function. In this whirlwind of morning routines and economic maneuvering, the villa remains a symbol of both grandeur and grim reality. It's a place where luxury and exploitation coexist, where the daily rituals of the elite are underpinned by the toil of the many. As you continue through this day in the life of a Roman villa, keep in mind that every olive oil massage and simple breakfast is a reminder of the societal layers and the human costs that underpin them. And as the villa awakens to the sounds of daily life, slaves bustling about, the aroma of fresh bread mingling with olive oil, and the ever-present hum of Roman industry, remember there's more to uncover. The villa's day is far from over, and the stories it holds are as layered as its marbled halls. Stay curious, because in ancient Rome, the surface is only the beginning of the story. And as the villa awakens to the sounds of daily life, slaves bustling about, the aroma of fresh bread mingling with olive oil, and the ever-present hum of Roman industry, remember there's more to uncover. The villa's day is far from over, and the stories it holds are as layered as its marbled halls. Be curious, because in ancient Rome, the surface is only the beginning of the story. Now, let's step outside and take a midday stroll across the villa's sprawling estate, where the real economic magic, or let's call it toil and sweat, happens. If you thought the villa was just about lounging in the atrium or feasting in the triclinium, think again. This place is an agricultural powerhouse, a veritable Roman factory floor, minus the assembly line, but with plenty of manpower. First off, what are these Romans growing out here? Well, think of grapes and olives as your two best friends. Roman villas were practically drowning in vineyards and olive groves. Grapes were the gateway to wine, a drink as essential to Romans as water was. In fact, the average Roman might down a liter of the stuff a day. Meanwhile, olives were the multi-tool of the ancient world, pressed into oil for cooking, lighting, and of course, your morning grooming routine. Talk about versatile. But the Romans didn't stop there. They were big fans of diversification, like a good stock portfolio. Wheat was a staple, and they also grew barley, beans, and a range of fruits and vegetables. Picture a farmer's market on steroids, all geared towards sustaining the villa and its dependents. The diversity of crops wasn't just for show or survival. It was a shrewd business strategy. Sure, the Romans liked their bread and circuses, but they also knew a thing or two about hedging against crop failure. And let's talk about the tools of the trade. Roman agricultural technology was a curious mix of innovation and brute force. Plows were typically made of wood, reinforced with iron, and pulled by oxen or donkeys. These beasts of burden were the real MVPs of the Roman fields, plodding along with the stoic determination of a seasoned marathoner. The Romans even developed a water-powered mill to grind grain, a feat of engineering that turned nature's force into flour. They were the original eco-warriors, if you conveniently overlook the whole slavery thing. Now, before you get swept away by the pastoral charm, let's inject a dose of reality. These idyllic fields were no more a bucolic paradise than a modern industrial farm. is a serene getaway. The labor was backbreaking, and yes, it was the slaves who bore the brunt. They worked from sunrise to sunset, planting, tending, and harvesting, with little rest and less reward. A day's work was measured not in hours, but in sweat and blisters. You might be picturing a peaceful countryside, birds chirping, and a gentle breeze wafting through the olive trees. Forget it. The fields were a hive of activity, with the constant clatter of tools and the shouted orders of overseers. This was no leisurely retreat. It was a high-pressure production line, and the stakes were as high as the villa's columns. And here's where we bust another myth, the idea that Roman agriculture was efficient and sustainable by today's standards. Sure, they rotated crops and used manure to fertilize fields, practices that sound eco-friendly. But let's not kid ourselves. The soil was often overworked and nutrient-depleted. Romans had no concept of soil conservation, and land degradation was a real issue. They didn't exactly have the luxury of modern agricultural science or the foresight to predict the ecological consequences of their methods. Fast forward to today, and some of these issues might sound eerily familiar. Modern agriculture, with its intensive farming practices and chemical reliance, faces similar environmental challenges. Erosion, loss of biodiversity, and soil depletion. Check, check, and check. The difference is that ancient Rome could expand its territory to find fresh land. We, on the other hand, are stuck on this one planet. Another not-so-idyllic aspect of Roman agriculture was the social hierarchy it reinforced. Land ownership was power, pure and simple. The wealth generated by these farms cemented the villa owner's status in society, much like owning a Fortune 500 company today. It was a classic tale of the rich getting richer, while the laborers remained just that, laborers. Yet, despite the harsh realities, the romantic image of the Roman countryside persists. Why? Well, it's a comforting illusion, much like believing that every artisan loaf is hand-kneaded by a smiling baker. The myth of the noble farmer and his fruitful land is as old as time, a narrative that glosses over the sweat and sacrifice to focus on the harvest's bounty. So, as the sun reaches its zenith and the fields hum with the rhythms of labor, remember that this is the heartbeat of the villa's economy. It's a place where fortunes are made and lives are spent, and where the line between luxury and labor is as thin as a grapevine's tendril. The villa is more than its walls and gardens. It's a microcosm of the Roman world, a testament to both human ingenuity and exploitation. The day is far from over, and there's still so much more to uncover. The villa has its secrets to share, its pressures to reveal, and its demands to meet. As we journey forward, keep in mind that every row of vines and olive tree stands as a witness to the complex tapestry of ancient Roman life. Stay tuned, because our Roman villa adventure has plenty more twists and turns ahead. As the afternoon sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the villa's columns, it's time to swap the rustic symphony of the fields for the bustling cacophony of the local market. Welcome to the Agora or Forum, depending on which Roman province you're chilling in. This is where the real economic action unfolds, a vibrant hub that's less of a quaint farmer's market and more of a raucous Wall Street trading floor, minus the ties and plus a few togas. First things first, we've got to talk currency, because no, the Romans weren't trading chickens for tunics. Enter the denarius, the superstar of Roman coins. Struck from silver, it was the backbone of Roman commerce. Picture it as the ancient world's answer to the dollar, but with Caesar's mug instead of Washington's. By the 1st century, inflation was already rearing its ugly head. What used to be a solid 3. 5 grams of silver was often debased, making the denarius more nickel and dime than solid silver. Now, what could a denarius get you? Well, a loaf of bread might set you back a mere as one of the smaller bronze coins. For a denarius, you could snag a jug of wine or a pound of pork, assuming you weren't trying to impress anyone with your culinary extravagance. But let's be real, most Romans weren't rolling in denarii. The average laborer might earn 1 denarius a day, enough to cover basic needs, but not enough to splurge on the Roman equivalent of avocado toast. As you wander through the market, it's a sensory overload of sights, sounds, and let's be honest, smells. Stalls line the streets, each one a little microcosm of Roman life. There's the fishmonger, hawking his catch of the day with an aroma that's more authentic than enticing. Over there, a spice merchant displays wares straight from the far corners of the empire, saffron from Spain, pepper from India, and cinnamon from Arabia. This was globalization before it was cool, folks. Let's not forget the textiles. From simple woolen tunics to luxurious silks imported from the mysterious lands of the East, fashion was as much about status as it was about style. A toga made from the finest silk could set you back a small fortune, a sartorial statement as loud as a Roman trumpet. Want to show off your wealth? Forget the gold watch. Drape yourself in silk. But the market wasn't just about goods. It was the social media of the day. People gossiped, swapped news, and haggled over prices with the fervor of a Wall Street trader. Roman markets were as much about the art of the deal as they were about the goods themselves. And haggling wasn't just expected. It was practically a sport. Merchants would start high, buyers would counter low, and eventually they'd meet somewhere in the middle. If you weren't up for negotiating, you might as well wear a sign that says, "I love paying too much." Now, you might think this bustling market scene is all sunshine and roses, but let's peel back the layers. The reality was a bit grittier. Not all the streets were paved with Roman ingenuity. Many were muddy, crowded, and filled with the kind of chaos that makes Black Friday look like a stroll in the park. Thieves and pickpockets were as much a part of market life as the traders, always on the lookout for an unwary sharper, distracted by a particularly shiny amphora. And speaking of amphorae, the clay vessels were the ancient equivalent of today's plastic bottles, ubiquitous and indispensable. They transported everything from wine to olive oil, with each region boasting its own distinctive style. If you were a savvy merchant, you could read them like a barcode, identifying the origin and quality of the goods within. Trade networks were the lifeblood of the Roman economy, stretching from Britannia to Egypt and beyond. Roman roads were as straight as the empire's ambitions, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and ideas. The market wasn't just a place to buy and sell. It was a microcosm of the empire's vast reach. Goods from across the Mediterranean mingled in a chaotic dance of commerce, a testament to Rome's economic prowess. But let's not romanticize it too much. For every successful merchant, there were countless others scraping by, battling not just economic pressures, but the fickle whims of fate and fortune. A bad harvest, a shipwreck, or a political upheaval could spell disaster for those whose livelihoods were tied to trade. It was a high-stakes game, and not everyone was dealt a winning hand. As you navigate the market, it's clear that the idealized image of Roman commerce, orderly, prosperous, and sophisticated, was often just that, an ideal. The gritty reality was a world of uncertainty, where fortunes could be made and lost in the blink of an eye. Yet amid the chaos, there was a certain vibrancy, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. The market was more than a place of business. It was a theater of life, where the drama of Roman society played out in real time. So, as the day wears on, and the market begins to wind down, with traders packing up their wares and the last few sharpers haggling over the dregs, take a moment to reflect. This is the beating heart of the Roman economy, a place where the past and the present collide in a cacophony of commerce and culture. The market is more than just a place of trade. It's a living, breathing testament to the complexities and contradictions of Roman life. And just like that, the vibrant chaos of the market fades into the background as the afternoon gives way to evening. As you make your way back to the villa, pockets a little lighter, perhaps a few coins richer. Consider the stories woven into the fabric of the day. The villa may be grand, but it's the lifeblood of the market that keeps the Roman world spinning on its axis. Stay tuned. Our journey through the day in the life of a Roman villa is far from over, and the evening promises its own set of adventures. As the villa's grand entrance reappears on the horizon, the sun dips lower, painting the sky in hues that wouldn't look out of place in a Renaissance masterpiece. Though, ironically, the Renaissance is still a good millennium away. Inside, the buzz of preparation is palpable. Tonight, the villa transforms from a bustling home to the epicenter of Roman social life, a dinner party in the triclinium. Now, let's dive into the social maelstrom that is a Roman scena. Forget your average dinner party. This is more akin to a fusion of political summit, reality TV drama, and Michelin-star dining experience. The triclinium, as we discussed, is the grand stage, where the well-heeled of Roman society recline on their couches, ready to engage in the ancient art of social networking. But not the LinkedIn kind. This is face-to-face, wine in hand, status on display networking. When it comes to seating arrangements, the stakes are as high as a gladiator match, minus the actual bloodshed usually. The host, or dominus, strategically places guests based on their social rank and political clout. The most coveted spot is the lectus medius, the middle couch, which is the ancient equivalent of sitting at the head table. If you find yourself perched there, congratulations. You're either someone important or someone who knows someone important. For the rest, it's a delicate dance of etiquette and quiet desperation, trying not to end up in the lowest tier, the lectus amuse, which might as well come with a side of better luck next time. The menu is a spectacle in itself, a testament to the Roman palate, which swings between the sublime and the bizarre faster than you can say pass the garum. Speaking of which, garum, a fermented fish sauce, is the umami-packed darling of Roman cuisine, splashed liberally over almost everything. If you're not a fan, well, tough luck. It's as ubiquitous as ketchup in a modern diner. Tonight's menu might feature stuffed dormice, yes, really, oysters from the coast, and a selection of exotic fruits like pomegranates or figs. For dessert, honeyed dates are a sweet finale that even a calorie-conscious Roman would deem worth the indulgence. Wine, predictably, flows like the Tiber. Romans had a penchant for watering it down, a practice that kept the revelry from tipping into outright debauchery most of the time. Wine was often mixed with spices and honey, transforming it into something that would make a sommelier both intrigued and horrified. But let's not overlook the economic side. Wine was a lucrative trade commodity, and a host showcasing a rare vintage was making a statement as loud as the bacchanalian laughter filling the room. Entertainment is as essential as the food, and tonight's lineup might include a troupe of dancers, a lyre player, or, if the host is feeling particularly extravagant, an after-dinner philosophical debate. Think of it as intellectual sparring, where the sharpness of your wit is as crucial as the sharpness of your dagger, metaphorically speaking, of course. The evening unfolds in layers of conversation and intrigue, where alliances are forged, business deals are subtly inked, and rivalries are as palpable as the aroma of roasting meats. It's like a live-action chess game, where the pieces are people, and every smile or quip is a strategic move. For a Roman elite, these gatherings are more than mere social calls. They're pivotal social battlegrounds where connections are currency, and currency is power. Yet, let's not get too swept away by the glamour. Underneath the polished facade lies a stark reality. This opulence is a privileged bubble, far removed from the lives of ordinary Romans. While the elite dines on peacock and sips vintage wine, the average Roman citizen is likely breaking bread, literally, with far humbler fare. A simple meal of pulse, a porridge of grains, is more the norm for the everyday Roman than the lavish spread of the triclinium. So what about the myth of the Roman feast? It's a narrative as enticing as the feast itself, a vision of decadence and sophistication. Yet, like all good myths, it's only part of the story. Sure, the extravagance is real, but so too were the social pressures, the relentless pursuit of status, and the underlying economic realities that fueled and sustained such excess. As the evening winds down, with guests departing in varying states of inebriation and satisfaction, the villa's quiet returns, leaving echoes of laughter and the clatter of empty amphorae. The dinner party, for all its theatre and pageantry, is a microcosm of Roman society, beautifully crafted, deeply complex, and riddled with contradictions. In the end, Roman villa and its grand feasts are more than just relics of a bygone era. They are reflections of human nature's eternal dance with power, prestige, and the pursuit of pleasure. From the structured chaos of the market to the calculated elegance of the triclinium, this day in the life of a Roman villa has peeled back the layers of history, revealing a world that is as fascinating as it is flawed. And as you reflect on this journey through ancient Rome, consider how much has changed, and yet how much remains the same. The allure of luxury, the intricacies of social dynamics, and the human penchant for storytelling. The legacy of Rome is not just in its ruins, but in its enduring influence on the fabric of human civilization. As you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of the past whisper their tales, a gentle reminder that history is not just a series of events, but the ever-evolving story of us all.